Hey, you look nice today. Welcome to the Juicecast. This is a comfy gaming podcast where we analyze and give our subjective viewpoints on every aspect of a game. It can be a lot of fun seeing what we do or don't agree on and how that might fit into the normative view. It's like a big celebration of gaming. We hit various topics such as the development, artwork, music, multiple gameplay topics, and of course, story and characters. But make sure you stick around till the end for a bonus topic too. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I enjoy you taking the time to listen. Thank you so much. Hello everyone and welcome to the Juicecast. Today we'll be tackling Final Fantasy III, and I have with me Ludiscere. So why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Alistair, and I run a YouTube channel called Ludiscere. Most people online just call me Ludi, because Ludiscere is difficult to pronounce. But either that or Alistair is okay. I make long-form analysis content centered around video games with a heavy focus on mythology, linguistics, that kind of thing. The channel's known for, I'd say 2 big videos, one on Hades, one on Xenoblade 2. But my main project is a series where I do a really deep dive into the main series Final Fantasy games. And my most recent video released is about Final Fantasy IV, so kind of close to 3. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to recently and who I am.
Indeed. And let me know how you guys pronounced his name in the comments below. I am curious because I did not know that it was Ludiscere. His links will also be in the description.
Yeah. Stupid name. It's a bad idea.
No, I don't think it's stupid. I think it's cool.
You never think when you make a channel, you never think anyone's going to have to say it.
Yeah.
I came up with it. I was like, oh yeah, let's do that. And now I'm reaping the consequences. That's not a phrase, but you know what I mean.
Well, if they say they call you Ludi, then it works too.
Yeah, it's easier.
I'm Juice, so it's pretty easy in that sense. And if this is your first time on the podcast, I would really like you to follow along. Let us know what you guys think and what your experience with the game is. Go through as the video goes on. Give us timestamps in the comments. I want to know what you agree with, what you don't agree with. It means a lot to me. And yeah, so that's going to be it. And we're going to get started now, talking about our personal history with Final Fantasy. So why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. So I ended up playing Final Fantasy VIII when I was about 4 or 5. It was my first Final Fantasy. My older sister got it from at the time. I mean, I don't know if this exists in the States. There was a shop called Woolworths in the UK. I think it still exists in Australia. That kind of sold everything. One of those shops, and it doesn't exist anymore. But my sister got Final Fantasy VIII from there, and brought it home. And I remember watching her kind of play the opening cutscene of Final Fantasy VIII, and I was like, whoa, that is cool. So I got kind of hooked on it, even though I wasn't playing it at the start. And then I kind of watched her go through the kind of introduction to the point where I don't think you've played 8, but there's a bit about an hour into the game where you do your first mission. And there's this amazing cutscene where your boats are going onto a beach, and there's it's super cool. Squall standing on a boat. It's great. But they when you're a kid and you have that kind of wide-eyed, I'm enthralled by this. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So yeah, I got totally hooked. And then a few years later, this is so specific, but I was at a library with my grandparents, and at the time, this library in this small town near where I lived, it let you rent out games.
Yeah, that's still the case actually locally for me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I've never seen a library that's done that since, but obviously I'd only played Pokemon Yellow and Final Fantasy VIII at this point in my life. And it sounds stupid in retrospect, but I'd never really considered that 8 meant there were different ones.
Right, interesting.
So when I saw Final Fantasy X on PS2, I lost my mind. And I basically begged for them to rent it out. And the week that I had that game was probably the most formative week of my whole life. Total birth of a lifelong obsession.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was basically how it began for me, and kind of since then, it's been my main thing.
I see. I mean, you've got it all displayed. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I've actually got some stuff. Oh, which way do I go? I guess this way.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's more stuff around.
Is that a Manaphy as well?
No, it's not a Manaphy. It's Poo-Poo, which I can't believe I've just said out loud. It's a wee alien from Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh, okay, that's why I wouldn't know. Okay.
I mean, it looks like Manaphy.
Yeah.
It's a weird one to make a plush of, because it's not like the most famous character. It's like in a weird side quest where you have to give it elixirs. But yeah, cute.
Yeah, it looks. I just wasn't sure because you got like the Porygon and the Togekiss right in front of it, so I was like, that kind of is that a Manaphy?
No, it does look it.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, no, I haven't played 8, but I have seen the intro cutscene to it, and I've seen speed runs of it and whatnot. So because I've speed run 7 a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So for me, I did not grow up with Final Fantasy at all. I just didn't have a PlayStation 1. I never had the games on NES or SNES or anything like that, unfortunately. I knew of the existence of Sephiroth and Cloud because osmosis through media. There are lots of like YouTube poops of One Winged Angel or a bunch of nonsense like that. Yeah. And I was watching new characters come out for Super Smash Bros. 4, and there was a trailer for Cloud Strife and Final Fantasy, and I was like, he looks pretty cool. And so it was one of the characters that I picked up eventually in that game. It's actually the main character that I play now. It's him and Zelda and Sephiroth. And it was that kind of... I ended up like really, really playing the character at the end of the Smash 4 life cycle, and I wanted to know what happened with this character. Where did he come from? What's his story? And so Final Fantasy VII was coming out on Nintendo Switch. So I wanted to do that. I really wanted to play the game, but Final Fantasy IX actually shadow dropped that night I was watching the Nintendo Direct. So I downloaded it. And since then, the series has become a huge part of my life, and that's one of my favorite games of all time now is Final Fantasy IX. I later got into Final Fantasy VII after, and then 7 Remake, and went back to play 1, 2, and now 3. So I'm just going to keep making my way through the series and keep enjoying it for what it is. And that leads us to where we are today with Final Fantasy 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, it only gets better as well. You've got some great ones lined up.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get to 4, 5, and 6, honestly. Yeah. So I guess with that out of the way, we can get into some of the development of the game. And this is something that I'm not like super knowledgeable on as I am with some other games, but I think it is still interesting to talk about. Before I say what I have to say, is there anything that you want to bring to the table in this topic?
I think Final Fantasy III is an interesting one development-wise, because it had like that kind of thing that happens sometimes where a game suffers developmentally from coming out so late in the life cycle of a console, or so close to the birth of a new one.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean?
Wasn't it supposed to be on SNES?
This is debated.
Okay.
I can't think exactly how it is off the top of my head. But I know that it was like conflict between the development, not conflict, but like 3 and 4 were basically in development at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that resources were taken from 3. I know that particularly for translation, and put into 4 because it seemed prudent to prioritize the shiny new console.
Right.
So that's why we never saw an English translation of the game until 2006. But it's a really interesting one. It was also the last one developed by Nasir Gabelli, who was like an Iranian American programmer who programmed the first 3. And yeah, from 4 onwards, it was different. So it was kind of like the end of an era in that sense. Mm-hmm. But it was crazy because it was 3 games within 2.5 years.
Yeah, it's insane.
Which even at the time is such a ridiculous turnover.
Yeah.
Because I can't think of the exact date, but I'm going to give it a go. I think it was like December the 18th, 1987 was the first one in Japan.
Mm-hmm. In 1990, it was FF3, right?
Yeah, it was April 27th, 1990. So like, yeah, it was like 1 year between 1 and 2, and then 1 year and 4 months between 2 and 3. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
I kind of can't believe that happened. But I think a lot of the interesting development stories kind of happened for 1, and not so much for 2 and 3. 2 and 3, it kind of feels like they fell by the wayside a little bit in terms of like retroactive attention, kind of English language attention for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. When it comes to English attention, I know that actually I had read that 4 and 5 were in development at the same time, and that 4 was originally supposed to be the NES title, and then it ended up being SNES because they were already working on translating FF1 for the US at that time, and that 4 ended up being on SNES anyway because they.
I think 4 and 5 being developed at the same time is actually what I meant, and I got confused.
Oh, okay.
But I think they must have. 4 and 3 must still have been happening at the same time though, because 4 came out in 1991.
Yeah, pretty close. It would have to.
It's still a year after.
Yeah.
I don't know how they. I mean, and 5 was 92. 6 was 94. I don't know how they did this.
It still surprises me that 7 was made as fast as it was.
Yeah, 7 was just 3 years. But that's. I know we're really getting ahead of ourselves now. But 8 and 9. And
right after each other,
within like 4 years of each other.
Yeah, well, 8 and 9 had 2 separate development teams working at the same time, right?
Still, I think they did, but it's just it makes you realize. Obviously, there's a lot more going on now, but now we're getting 6-7 year waits between single entries.
Oh yeah,
and they're not even as good.
Uh-oh, the controversial takes coming through. Just kidding. I mean, I like some of these games a lot more than I did 15, which I recently played too, which was quite a an interesting title. I'll say that, having to watch an anime and a movie and buy DLC to enjoy a game. But that'll be its own podcast. Yeah, I mean, I know one thing that I know about the development was that there were 2 people who kind of branched off to make the Saga series in the middle of the Final Fantasy III development, and then Sakaguchi kind of pulled the pixel artist, I believe, kind of back into working on FF3, and he's the one who made all of the art for the job system.
Yeah, that's... Yeah. Oh god, come on. It's either Koichi Ishii or Hiromichi Tanaka. I can't think which is which. I should have done my research.
Honestly, I can never remember the names. I would have had to have wrote it down in this outline for me to remember. All I know is like Sakaguchi, Nobuo Uematsu, and like obviously the names everyone knows.
I know that Koichi Ishii developed, like he designed like the Chocobo and the Moogle and stuff.
Okay,
that was him. Chocobo was in the second game.
In 2, yeah.
Moogle started in 3, so there's a good chance it was him. But yeah, I think both of those 2 went off and did delve into Saga, but I could be misremembering that.
I believe, yeah, I mean, I know that 2 of them did delve into Saga, and one of them kind of focused on that series, which still goes on today, and I haven't experienced that yet. And I don't know if it was the person who was kind of behind, like, the battle system of Final Fantasy II, or is that the same person? I
mean, off the top of my head, I can't think if it is, but given the style of Saga and the style of Final Fantasy II, it'd be weird if it wasn't.
Right. And then the other one was like was an artist. So like they went to go work on Saga, and then Sakaguchi was like, come hither, please. I need you to go work on this thing right now. This is kind of crucial. We have 22 jobs for you to work on, so have fun. And then there was like some deal where, fine, he would only do it if he got to work on like their in-battle sprites and the overworld sprites and all this stuff, so there was no like conflict when it came to the art style is what I was reading. So that's an interesting part. And then actually, here's one thing about the development that I actually kind of forget about right now. Sakaguchi's mother actually passed away during the development of Final Fantasy III. This is when it happened. Yeah, this is when it happened. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of loss in Final Fantasy III. I want to say it's probably about equal to what's in Final Fantasy II, but yeah, that happened during this, and I think that's why this game kind of has this overall message of like look for hope in anywhere that you can get it, right? Even in the darkest of times, you have that. I think Sakaguchi kind of obviously you see it in later games too. Everyone wants to say that it happened in 7, right? That's like what the common thing people think is, but it actually happened way before, and it just like permeates into all of your other entries, because obviously if you're dealing with something like that, then it's going to change your life forever in your own art. And she was someone who was super supportive of Sakaguchi's work since he was a young boy when it came to creative works and things like that, or like growing up wanting to be a musician and then going into game development and everything else. So
yeah. Wow, cool fact. I mean, tragic at the same time, but yeah, I had no idea about that. It's amazing how I spent months looking into this game to make a video on it, and we're like 5 minutes in, and I'm already learning new stuff. That's great.
100%. Yeah, even just like fact checking myself. Yeah, actually, yeah, the common belief is that she died during FF7. This is actually wrong. She didn't die during the development of FF7. She died during the development of FF3 for the NES. So, and I think it shows. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. That's all I know about the development of the game, though. Other than I know the end of it was really struggled too, because someone, I don't know if it's the American that you were talking about, but I know that they had to like move. Yeah, they had to move back to the US to finish the development of the game. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's what that is. Cool. So there's some fun facts for you guys if you didn't know that about Final Fantasy III. I always like to talk about the development and where the people are coming from when they're getting into the game, and how that may translate into themes that the game is trying to say. Cool.
I don't know if this counts for development, because it's not like a development story. But one of the things that was changed kind of in how they made the game that I really like was there's a few kind of like classic Final Fantasy ideas now that happened in the development of Final Fantasy III. And one of them is it was the first game that had blue windows and menus. So that was
that's true.
Which is now, when you think blue, I mean, imagine playing Final Fantasy VII without the blue window. The first thing I do when I play Final Fantasy IX, because you can choose
between gray and blue. Yeah.
Blue. Say Final Fantasy XIV, you can make your windows blue, and it's just like, it just feels right.
Of course.
So that was one of the first things. And another thing was it was the first game in the series that had numbers appear on the sprite that you damaged, as opposed to like a wee bar at the bottom, like a window that was like, you know, whatever took the whatever damage.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's not like a development story per se, but
the UI changes regardless. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things that kind of became staples.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Also auto battle, but that's not so much a UI change. But God,
auto battle is...
sorry, I mean also aiming.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I misspoke. It was auto targeting. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Final Fantasy III lets you auto target, because in the previous games, I guess I'll finish the sentence because I kind of cut you off anyway. If you start to target something, but another party member kills it before, then you would just miss your attack. Now in Final Fantasy III, it auto-targets the next person. Unfortunately, this wasn't carried on with magic attacks in the original. No. I believe it is. I know it is for sure in the Pixel Remaster, which is how I played it, but a lot of people experienced it in the DS version, which I don't know if they do that in the DS version or through the original Famicom
I think it's the original
version.
Do you think that happening in the? I don't remember that happening in the DS version.
Okay,
might be wrong. Very good chance I'm wrong.
Yeah,
but still, cool changes.
Yeah, cool. Definitely some cool UI changes and some gameplay changes that, I mean, it would be so frustrating to target something and then have it completely miss because something else targeted it, and you would have to. Again, like it kind of goes into the fact that you know what your party is targeting on, because trying to keep track of that all at the same time when you just want to get through a lot of these battles would be pretty time consuming.
I think as well there's like the element of mental maths where there's no HP bars or anything. Obviously, it's a game in 1987, so you've got to kind of have kind of keep track in your head of how much health every enemy has, how much health your party members on average do. And then sometimes you're against 9 enemies at once. And then you've got to try and be like, right, who has enough that this character can attack them? And it's like, whoa, God, this is a test. This is an exam.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you played the original NES Final Fantasy 1 ever. But it's an ordeal.
Yeah.
The auto targeting thing is truly an ordeal. It's fun in a way to kind of, it makes every battle like feel like a battle.
Right.
But at the same time, you're like, I just want to continue.
Yeah, I feel like if you were to grow up around that time, it wouldn't be as big of a deal because you're trying to get as much time out of this title as you possibly can, and it was a new idea, right? But for me, I would be extremely frustrated doing something like that because for me, this is just another random encounter in these huge dungeons where you're trying to make me keep track of every single little thing. I played the Pixel remasters for 1, 2, and 3, which I actually think are probably the best ways to play them, but I guess I'll get into that a little bit later. Depends on what version that you play.
Yeah,
but
Freelancer in the 3D remake.
Freelancer. Yeah, it is kind of weird. In fact, I think it kind of strays from the original vision a little bit, and I'll get into that. I'll get into why a little bit later. But Onion Knight becomes a class that you can, or a job that you can unlock way later in the game. I don't know if it's in Eureka or somewhere else.
No, it's different if you play on DS or on Steam. So there's a system in the game that I can't remember the name of. You know Mognet in Final Fantasy IX?
Yes.
They essentially do a Moogle mail thing in 3 as well.
Okay.
And on DS, you can like send letters to people and read letters from characters and stuff. And you had to do something with that. I can't remember exactly what. And then you'd unlock a side quest to get the Onion Knight job. You could probably do this like third of the way, quarter of the way.
Okay.
And eventually in the Steam version of the game, probably other versions too, where you don't have this mail possibility.
Yeah.
It's just a side quest you can do. So it doesn't take too long, but I guess kind of lining up with what you were saying, Onion Knight's cool, but the potential of it can't be unlocked until you're that late into the game. So you might as well not have it for most of that time.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you get the Sage and the ninja jobs at the very end of the game and the originals as well. And it kind of makes that swap, right? Where you get those actually earlier in the 3D remake than you do in the DS one, right? I'm pretty sure you get them from a crystal or something. I could be completely wrong on this, but
wait.
I think you get them way earlier.
I feel like you've unlocked a memory. Yeah, maybe you're right.
There's so many differences between the versions, it's hard to keep track of.
In my head, I've always had it like that you get to the bottom of Eureka, and then you get them. But yeah, now I'm thinking that you might be right in the Earth Crystal, which I think is the last one you get in Final Fantasy III. I think that might give you Sage and Ninja in the 3D remake. Yeah.
That's crazy. They must be like not as powerful, right? Because Devout you already have like Black Mage.
Sage.
Yeah.
And I think Sage's summoning abilities aren't as good as Summoner. And I don't think they're as good at Black Magic as Magus. So it's the kind of thing where like you could do it. I mean, most 2D gameplay, like playthroughs of Final Fantasy III, people just have 2 ninjas and 2 sages. But yeah, it's viable, but it's less viable in the remake.
The sages are essentially much more powerful red mage in FF3. Yeah, than the 3 remake. Power. Yeah.
But ninjas are still pretty busted, to be fair, in the remake. They're still good.
Oh, okay.
If you can just, because you buy shurikens at the bottom of Eureka, and it's quite easy to farm money, so you can
9999.
Yeah, exactly.
Damage cap your way through. I think the original Onion Knight intention was that it's just supposed to be some round form that kind of is like a baby, right? And a lot of the
pretty much
the game's themes have to do with like you're taking on all these different jobs, things that you don't necessarily want to do, but that you have to do to get through the tasks and whatnot. And it kind of has that air of growing up, right? Yeah. And you starting as an Onion Knight is almost representative of that, I feel, especially closer to the end of the game. When you become paralyzed and you look in that mirror, the reflection is the Onion Knight. It's like that helpless child inside. Yeah, right.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting little thing that I had recently learned. I thought it was really cool. I didn't know that at all when I was playing. I didn't catch that, but
a lot of the people I've seen talk about it, like in terms of like naming conventions, kind of bought into the idea that, you know, not to do a Shrek reference here, but like the whole onions have layers thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, like as you level up or whatever, you kind of peel them back.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So you kind of like get to the core of who you are, kind of idea. Depends how cheesy you want to go with it. There's an interview with the developers where they basically say it's not the intention. It's a cool reading of it, and I like it. You know, definitely the author and all that. But apparently the job's called that because it looks like an onion. They drew it and they're like,
yeah, of course, yeah.
So they called it an onion, mate. But I've always liked the idea that there was something more to it. But I know what you mean. It's nice to have the kind of like base job that ends up, you know, like level 90 plus, eclipsing all the others. And there's even God, I hope this is right. There's equipment that you can get as rare drops in the Crystal Tower. I think you can fight like different colors of dragons. It's random encounters, and there's like yellow, green, and be red. And they have the chance of dropping something rare that only Onion Knights can equip. So there's like ultimate armor in the game, but only for your base class.
Is this in the original or is this in the 3D remake?
3D remake, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's in the original.
Because in the 3D remake, it's like you have to go out of your way to get the Onion Knight class, and that actually becomes a really poor class until you're level 99, I believe, with it.
Pretty much.
And then it becomes the most powerful job in the game. And then you go through and you fight those random encounters, and you get that ultimate armor for it and the ultimate weapons, I guess. In the originals, I'm not quite sure if that's the case.
I can't mind how it is in the NES version, because I've never played the NES version. I played the Pixel Remaster and the DS remake twice. But now I can't think if that exists in the Pixel Remaster. I want to say it doesn't actually exist in the Pixel Remaster. But it's the same. There's a lot of stuff in the 3D remake, like you were saying. Like, when you've maxed out your job level, you can go get an ultimate piece of equipment for that job from, like, a master smith who walks out all of the towns, and that's really cool feature that wasn't in the original. I feel like they kind of added something to the job system. Like 3's job system is good, but like it's the worst job system in the series. But that's just by virtue of it being incipient. It's never going to be the best because it's the first one.
Right. Yeah, they had to go through steps to get it to where it is.
There's going to be like, you know, kind of, I don't know how to word it. Like,
well, I mean, there's a progression, right? Yeah, of course there's going to be issues with the first time you do something.
Perfect the first time. I mean, even by the second time, they've basically fixed it. But it is cool that in kind of subsequent versions of the game, they didn't just kind of rest on their laurels, and they like elaborated on it, gave you some kind of more incentive to, because I've always disliked how vague job level was as a concept.
Yeah. It kind of takes a lot from FF2, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah,
it kind of feels like an evolution of that, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, but you're right, it is rather ambiguous. You don't know exactly what leveling up your job level does compared to leveling up your actual level, because it's not like the game tells you. Right?
Yeah, you're dead on. It's like when you're playing, 2 and you've got Fairy and Sword level to 9. And you're like, this means nothing to me.
Right.
It's like he does a little bit more damage. I'd love to. I'm not looking for like formulae. I just want to see numbers. Maybe just like a bit of clarification of what's going on, or like why I'm trying to do this. You know, making numbers go up is fun, but you want to have reason for it. So I guess that added something to the. I mean, most things from 2 were scrapped.
Yeah,
but they kept one of the weirdest features.
And I think when leveling up your job level, you have I don't know everything that it does, but I know it definitely increases your critical hit ratio.
Yeah,
that's one thing that I noticed. I'm not sure of anything else, but it's almost essential that you do level up your job level as well, because if you're switching from one job to the next, you're all of a sudden doing less damage with a job that you thought you were going to be doing more damage with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even going from like a level 99 black mage to a level 1 magus, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're going to be doing less damage, even though way less. Well, maybe not way less, but definitely less, because you spent so much time working on that. And I think that also goes into that theme of like you have to growing into something and seeing that power come to you as you choose that job. Of course, I think that's the idea that they were going for with it.
There's an interesting concept in the 3D remake where it's called like the job adjustment phase. I don't think
I've heard of that
in the Pixel remaster, where basically you can change jobs whenever you want. That's the whole point of a job system. But whenever you do it in 3, you get a penalty, a stat penalty, and the length of that penalty is based on how different the jobs are. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you change from white mage to monk or something, you're going to have a bigger change than if you're going from, like, dark knight to knight, you know?
Right.
And it makes your stats worse. So there's kind of, when you see that on the surface, you think, is that just there to piss me off? Like, you know, when there's, like, artificial difficulty.
Yeah,
but I reckon the idea behind it is kind of linked to what you were saying about trying to kind of personify that idea of
growing into the job that you're doing, right? Yeah.
It makes you consider the consequences of playing about too much, kind of thinking like, you know, you're only going to get better if you stick at something. Maybe, you know, let's not get everything to level 5. Let's get a few things to level like 15.
Yeah,
that kind of idea. That you're going to find that, you know, that ends up working. I think that system, that concept, didn't work as well in practice as they hoped. But I think there's definitely a really interesting idea behind it. You can tell they were trying to make a point with it.
Yeah. At least that's how it seemed.
That point. But
I think in the original, it's not a job adjustment system, but instead you have to spend points or something to be able to change jobs. I forget exactly what the heck it is. But it's completely gone in the Pixel remaster, and you can just kind of switch jobs freely as you would in something like Final Fantasy V.
I think the drawback. Oh, go on, sir.
Oh, I was just gonna say, though, one thing that does happen is if you switch from a magic user to a different user and then switch back to the magic user, all of your magic charges are gone, which can really suck when you're in the middle of a dungeon.
Same thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that happened to me a bunch. And really like annoying. You said, in execution, it doesn't work as well, unfortunately, due to the fact that the game forces you to change jobs to get through certain areas, which is right. Because it's I was just gonna say it tries to pigeonhole a lot of almost like forcing you to switch to jobs to make sure that you experiment. You better do this. We're gonna make sure that you do it, right. And it starts even from the very first time when you have to like mini
dungeons.
Yeah. I was gonna say it happens like right off the bat with the fact that you have to mini all 4 of your characters to get in, and you'll instantly get wiped out if you're not a magic user. You better have at least 2 to get through there. Yeah. So it's teaching you this immediately, that this is something that you're gonna have to do, and it sucks that in the versions before you had that adjustment period where you got punished for doing it because they force you to do it. And then it just makes the encounters last longer and makes you enjoy the game less, and it spikes the difficulty, especially in the 3D remake. Is why one of the biggest reasons why I think the Pixel Remaster is probably the best way to play it right there. I think that's a reason in and of itself.
I think the Pixel Remaster is definitely a more pleasant gameplay experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something weirdly kind of satisfying about the 3D remake. But if I was recommending someone to play the game for the first time, I wouldn't tell them to do that.
Yeah. Is it the difficulty?
The way to go.
The difficulty that gets it for you?
It's pretty much the difficulty. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, I know the game quite well, having like played through it twice. So like, I kind of know what I'm doing, but if you weren't following a guide or anything and you were going through it, you're gonna get pumped. It's really harsh. It's the kind of thing where, I mean, we'll get into this later, but it's nasty. It can be really nasty. But I guess if we're sticking on jobs,
one good thing to bring up is the fact that the Wind Crystal, the first one that you get, gives you all the jobs that you're already familiar with in Final Fantasy I,
from 1.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That was always a really good idea. You need to build on a basis. Especially like most of the people who play Final Fantasy III probably will have played Final Fantasy I.
Mm-hmm.
Like Japanese audience at least. So it makes sense to kind of be like, here's what we know. Let's build on that. You always need that foundation. I think it's the slight problem is a lot of the jobs in the game don't really work. In the way they intend. When I say don't really work, I think the hardest part about balancing a job system is making all jobs viable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't have to be equally viable, but like, let's look at the Scholar, for example, in 3, which is notorious for having use in one battle, which is against Hein.
I didn't even use it.
You don't even have to.
Yeah.
And after that, it's like you get doubled item potency or something for using Scholar. And it's just like, who in their right mind is going to use Scholar when every other option is probably better?
Yeah.
It's kind of thing like Ranger.
Right.
Who plays as Ranger? And there's discrepancies in the versions as well, because my take on the jobs is the best job in the game is Bard.
Really?
In the remake.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't know.
In the Pixel Remaster.
Okay.
Because in the Pixel Remaster, it's kind of, as far as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of rubbish. Kind of just...
Yeah, I don't even remember, because I had experimented with a few of the jobs, but I always wanted to have like a black mage and a white mage, for example.
Yeah.
And then I always wanted to have a physical attacker, and then I swapped out, for the most part, I only swapped out like 1 or 2 of them. Because like my warrior turned into a knight, my black mage, I messed around with like a few different things, but I went to not Evoker. What's the terrain one? The one that looks like the black, Geomancer.
Yeah,
then I ended up, and then I went to Magus, and then my white mage was a cat girl, devout.
Yeah.
And then my last character changed to whatever the heck I needed them to be, like a thief and some things to open doors and whatnot. But I never went for the bard because I don't know. There were a few. The job system makes me want to replay the game, and I said the same thing about Final Fantasy I. It's like, how can I then go into it and experiment with these different jobs now? Like, am I going to do all bard or like half bard, half Geomancer? Like, what are the jobs that I didn't use? But yeah, I don't know anything about the bard because I had never used it in the Pixel Remaster. So
I think the gimmicks work slightly different in Pixel Remaster to the 3D remake, but in the remake, you can change your weapons in combat, and the weapon you have equipped, there are 5 harps that the bard can have, and all of them have a different effect when played. So like one is like a party-wide heal, one gives you haste, one gives you protect, one gives you shell, and the other one, which is the best one, does percentage-based damage to all enemies.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're in the Cloud of Darkness fight at the end, and you use percentage-based damage, you're doing like
Yeah.
9999 to the Cloud of Darkness and its two wee creepy arms.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a bard. And then you're like, oh, sorry, I'm just going to heal my party, and I'll also buff them. I'm going to do the most damage and the most healing and the most buffs. It's like,
Yeah.
What are you?
Wait, so you said in its two arms, does the 3D remake have a different Cloud of Darkness fight than the Pixel Remaster? Because the Pixel Remaster...
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so there are multiple targets.
Yeah.
Okay,
the Cloud the Cloud of Darkness in the Pixel Remaster is rubbish.
Okay.
It dies in like 2 hits. It's a much harder fight in the 3D remake. Still not that hard. Most of the stuff leading up to it's actually harder. But yeah, it's got like you know how it is in a JRPG. You're fighting a big boss, and it's got like left tentacle and right tentacle.
It's Bizarro Sephiroth kind of deal.
Yeah, it's that exactly.
Yeah.
Every JRPG worth its salt has at least one you need to take out the two
of course.
other things before you can attack the main body.
Yeah.
Kind of it's that kind of situation. But it's one of those things where it's like it's almost like you're playing 2 different games at points with the original or the Pixel Remaster and then the remake, because the jobs often do different things or have completely different purposes. But I guess some things stay in common, like the fact that the game is desperate for you to play as 4 Dragoons to fight Garuda.
Yeah, that I was actually... I didn't know that. I mean, I knew it because the game was telling me everything that it would tell me to switch to that job.
Yeah.
But when I first got to the fight without a Dragoon, and I got absolutely wrecked, obviously. I think that's the intention, because that Thunder move does so much damage to everyone. It, like, almost one-shots you. But, yeah, I ended up getting through it with 1 Dragoon. I switched my last one to a Dragoon, and I leveled up the job to maybe, like, level 40 or something. In that... There's a tower in that same kingdom where you get all the equipment, and I should have known then that it was like, oh yeah, I could just make everyone a Dragoon and give them all this equipment that's clearly here for you to be able to do that. And instead I was like, I'm going to make 1 a Dragoon. I'm going to sell all this stuff so I can get better equipment for all my jobs later. And and I'm just going to like get some more experience with the job system, and it just took me like a couple tries from there. But yeah, there are so many differences between the jobs, between the 3D remake and the Pixel Remaster and the original. The Pixel Remaster does keep some stuff from the 3D remake, but it's closer to the NES original, because the goal of the Pixel Remasters is to give you the original intent for the most part, just to make them a smoother experience. I remember, because obviously the game doesn't really tell you the differences between the jobs entirely. So I was like, I looked up a guide just to see what the differences between them are. But when you're looking at guides for this game, you have to be really careful that you have it on the right version, because I was looking at the 3D remake one, which is the most it's the one everyone talks about the most, I think, right? So it's like, oh, the knight can use level 1 healing magic, and I was like, oh, that's cool, and it can't in the Pixel Remaster. So that's just one small difference, but there are tons of them. So but that Garuda boss fight was a pain in the ass for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the worst. Weirdly, it's that, and there's another boss called Salamander. It's when you're doing like the fire crystal stuff in like the dwarf area. Gutsco.
That guy.
Salamander.
He follows you.
He follows it. And that fight in the 3D remake. When I was doing my playthrough for my video, I died like 4 times. It's just like, because bosses get like multiple turns, like in a row, and they always do a thing where it's like, oh, you've got 1 healer, I'm going to attack them 9 times. That type of thing. But it's just like, I'm just going to kill, and then you're screwed. What are you going to do? It's nasty. But I guess that's a balance thing that's always tricky. Because maybe this is stepping forward one bit too much, kind of in terms of order of what we're talking about.
No worries.
But the DS remake has a really different kind of concept for balance in the Pixel Remaster. And it's all to do with how many enemies you have in a battle at once. So I think the maximum amount of enemies you'll ever have in a battle in a 3D remake is 3.
3, yeah.
But in the Pixel Remaster, it's 9.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did to kind of make it balanced is they upped the health of all the enemies. So, you know, you're fighting 3 enemies instead of 9, but they've got 3 times as much health. So fundamentally, it's the same idea. You're taking the same amount of health.
Yeah, but the problem is that you're not always going to run into 9 enemies, right? So those 3 enemies are always going to have super high stat pools, and it's going to make it a slog to get through every single encounter.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In concept, I see where they're going.
Yeah.
In practice, actually, Final Fantasy III is the definition of, in concept, great. In practice,
Yeah.
And the problem was that they applied this concept to boss fights as well. But obviously, there's just one boss. So it's just the bosses in the 3D remake just have more health and are hard.
Yeah.
So that's often where the complaints come in. But I guess when it comes back to jobs there, the like kind of buzzwords I always want to use when it comes to jobs and bosses like Garuda and Hein and stuff, where you're forced into, kind of hemmed into having to use one specific thing, is the whole purpose of a job system is to have reactive adaptability.
Yeah.
You want to be able to like change things on the fly, or like fail, mix up, try again. That's the whole,
totally
whole point. And having you kind of going into Saronia and going to the Dragon's Tower, or whatever it's called, getting equipment for 4 Dragoons, in like a weird way, kind of pisses me off. Because it's like, I feel like at this point in the game, you shouldn't be teaching me anymore. I understand the purpose of the mini dungeons, like
yeah, of course,
it's like, you can change jobs for different situations. You don't need to do it twice with an Epto Dragon either. But that idea, and then they're like, maybe you should be 4 Dragoons for this.
Yeah,
like,
maybe you should
make a better fight.
Yeah.
It's annoying for them to make a system that hinges so much on play, experimentation, fun, freedom, and then every other fight be like, hey, you got to do it our way.
Yeah.
It's like, I thought this was a puzzle.
Right.
It's like, I don't know.
It's like experiment. Yeah, exactly. Don't solve it for you. That's a really good point. And actually go into the fight and experiment for yourself. What can you and can't you get away with? The game is pointing you in all directions to be a Dragoon, right?
Yeah. That's why I like what you did, where you've been like, fuck the system.
Yeah, no. I was like, I realized I needed 1 because jump does so much damage to it, but I'm not going to sit there and grind forever with my other 4. I'll give in a little bit, you know what I mean? But I still want to do it my way. I want to experiment, and it's cool that the Pixel Remaster doesn't punish you too bad for switching jobs like the other versions do, you know? But it kind of is like it's 2 sides of the same coin, right? Where it's like,
sure,
they're pigeonholing you and really forcing you to change jobs because there's this like overall theme, or at least I think there is, that you're going to have to do stuff that you don't like when you grow up, and you're going to have to, right? You're going to have to encounter right? And then from a gameplay perspective, it's like, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I never thought about that. That's really interesting. There's a kind of idea, again, I have the 3D remake in my head more than the Pixel Remaster. And there are conversations you can have with Doga and Une in 3D remake. Wait, can you do this? Can you chat to party members in the Pixel Remaster? Now I can't remember.
Yes.
And they have like kind of flavor dialogue and stuff. Okay. There's one I specifically remember from the 3D remake that may or may not be in the Pixel Remaster, where they talk about Xande and stuff. We'll get into that later. And Une kind of throws the whole you'll understand when you're older shtick at Luneth. Because they are ultimately just children. And you realize that most of the people in the game are like, well, I guess parental figures in some sense.
Yeah, that's true, because they are orphans. right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just made me wonder. I wonder if this is connected to what you said about Sakaguchi's mum.
Yeah.
Like children looking for guidance,
Yeah.
or people being. I mean, look at Doga Nune, who have that role of kind of like helping them along, and then
Totally. Yeah, and then they die after. I mean, that's one of the biggest examples of that happening, and that happens toward the end of the game too, right? It's like we know that she passed away during the middle of it, so which elements changed after? Yeah. Was that something that happens because they're watching you even after death? They're with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's part of the experience that happens later in the game. So good point, for sure.
That's based on something you said.
Yeah, but I mean, it's bringing up something. And you said Lunith as well. So I don't know them by names because they don't have names in in the game. But Lunith, I believe, is the I don't even remember.
He's the main one.
Okay.
He's like the kind of I mean, there's not really a main one, but he's like the first one in your party.
Okay.
Again, it's one of those tricky ones where characters in this game are strange because they don't really exist.
Right.
But like in the sense of Lunith, Ark, Ingus, and Refia are like the main characters from 3. But when you think of representation for 3 in other games,
it's just Onion Knight.
It's Onion Knight, who doesn't exist. And then when you think of the I'm sure again, probably something to get onto later, but the artwork for the game, of the NES box art at least, there's like Amano art of this random guy. And you're like, who's this? I don't know.
Yeah, who is?
So I think the idea for that is that it was like a proto Bart's. So I think it ends up being inspiration for Bart's further down the line. They've got things in common. Yeah, but it's the kind of thing where he's on the box and he's just like, well, this guy's not in the game. And yeah, it's weird that like you've got 4 named characters in the 3D remake. It's as if they're not there.
Yeah,
they've like in the kind of collective subconscious of the Final Fantasy universe. Who are they?
Right.
You know, people talk about the party members from like 4 and stuff, and it's like or 6 or whatever, and no one's like, oh man, do you remember when Ark did that? No.
Yeah, no.
Of course,
no one would know. Also, I mean, I feel like, and we'll get into it later, but I'm pretty sure the characters in the 3D remake don't get that much characterization or moments, right? Like it's the difference is, they get more, right? But I think
than like the Onion Knight kids in the Pixel remaster.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is that you start off the game with all 4 in the original in the Pixel remaster, and then in the 3D remake you like pick them up from different places. Are they still all orphans?
The whole point is that they're all orphans, yeah.
Okay.
But the picking them up takes about 45 minutes.
Okay.
So you basically have them all from the start. But yeah, they eventually find out they're all orphans. But this is because, I guess we'll get into this in plot, but the 3D remake invents more plot for the game that kind of adds a kind of relevance to why they're orphans. Or explains it, at least. But yeah, it's strange. It's a bizarre one for sure.
Cool. And then when it comes to the jobs in general, and the balancing around them, what did you use for your main party on your most recent playthrough?
So, I mixed and matched a lot more than you do.
Okay.
So basically, every single time you get a new crystal and you get new jobs, my whole party changed. I had a kind of I like having a rule in games where they do things like this, where if you unlock a new swathe of things, like I'm going to be only using the new stuff. Like if a new Pokemon game comes out, I am not using any old Pokemon on my first playthrough. I'm only using new stuff. I want the freshest experience possible. So like after Black Mage, White Mage, you know, all like the kind of Final Fantasy 1 jobs.
Yeah.
When I got to that second crystal, they're out the window. They're gone. I'll go back to one if I really need it. Probably a White Mage or something. But for the most part, I'm like, right, I'm getting to the next crystal with the new guys. And then when I get that crystal, they're out. Yeah. My final party was Viking, Bard, Devout, Ninja.
The Viking
So-
seems really, really cool. He seems a
Viking,
little
yeah.
broken, right? Because doesn't he attract attacks and has
Yeah.
super high defense?
So what the other thing about job level that you were saying earlier was it impacts it also impacts the effectiveness of your job specific skill,
Oh, yeah. That's what it is.
which
Yep.
for Viking is provoke.
Mhm.
So, draws all the attention. And Final Fantasy III is a game all about dual wielding.
Yep.
Um,
Which is also kind of takes that from FF2 as well. That was
Yeah.
an idea that was carried over.
but it lets you dual wield shields.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a character with like 99 job level in Viking, provoke also has a high priority, almost always goes first. And you equip yourself with 2 shields and be like, well, he's not attacking. You'll never die.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's like party-wide attacks that can't be taken in. But then if you've got a Devout, you can just heal everyone up.
Yep.
And then if you've got Ninja, doing 9999 every turn with shurikens, and you've got Bard, who can do anything
Yeah.
in the world, then it's like when I kind of like developed that party for my endgame, I was like, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like when it's like it's kind of like you go through the whole thing and you don't find that perfect party, and when you eventually do, it feels like all the mix and matching was worth it.
Yeah, totally. You got
real
to know the
satisfaction.
jobs inside and out to be able to make those
Yeah.
decisions in the end, for
And
sure.
that's the strength of that system. It's inherently more satisfying gameplay wise than something like Final Fantasy II. Arguably,
Yeah.
I mean, this is very contentious, but like arguably something like Final Fantasy IV, which is very structured, and like characters have jobs.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? Like Riddy as a summoner. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah,
what
there are 2
you gotta
types
deal
of
with.
Final Fantasies, and one you have a job system, and the other one's the jobs are pretty much decided for you. Or
That's the
maybe
way that,
you
like,
can
yeah.
do like hyper customization in some other way, but their stats align with a job that already exists.
People always talk about the 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6 thing for Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
So 1, 3, and 5 are like job games. 1 is loosely a job game, but you
Right.
know what I mean. And 2, 4, and 6 are narrative experiences
Mhm.
with fixed kind of customization. Funny enough, usually I do prefer the even numbered concept. I like a game that kind of knows what it is.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of satisfaction that you don't really get in some other games when you've kind of done all of the working yourself. There's definite merit to it. Whether or not it's inherently better, it's not for me to say.
Right.
But there's definitely a level of kind of inherent like, oh yeah, this is good. This is why I'm playing games.
Yeah.
When you make that final party, you trounce the final boss, and you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
that
what
must
it's all about.
exactly.
And you don't get that from beating the final boss in 4.
Yeah.
Um,
Because like when you're doing it in 3, it's like you worked for that, you experimented enough, you know how this works inside and out. In 4, it's more of a narrative.
yeah,
It feels more of a resolve in that sense, right? Whereas 3 doesn't really have that.
No.
At least not in my opinion, it doesn't.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah. No, and surprisingly, I feel like I align more with games like 1 and 3. I haven't played 4 and 6 yet, but yeah, but 3, I mean, if 5 is supposedly a fixed 3 that does everything better, again, 5 might be one of my favorite Final Fantasies ever.
Right.
Yeah, and while I didn't experiment quite as much as you, I think it's just because it was the unknown, right? Where it's like I'll do it with like one character and test it out with them and kind of see what it is. Maybe 2 different ones. If there's an upgrade to a job that I'm already using, then I'm like, oh, this fits perfectly into this. And then next time I play the game, I'll do something completely different. I think that's kind of how I work it in. It's just like a little bit of experimentation, but not to the point where, because like even where you're saying with Pokemon, where it's like you won't use like Pokemon from previous gens. So I'm like, oh, I really like this Pokemon from a previous gen, so this one's going to be on my team, but I'm also going to do like half and half of like new stuff and old stuff, right? So that's an interesting perspective.
I don't know what it is. It's just I like.
No, I
It seems like
respect it. I almost wish that I did that more. I don't know what it is.
I think my perspective is that it seems like a waste not to try new things.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and video games are a very kind of safe environment where you're, for the most part, allowed to try new things without facing any real consequences.
Yeah, no one's gonna come out and stab you.
Yeah, you're not going to need a battery. I mean, the only thing you lose is your time.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, you're probably having fun, so it's probably worth it. But yeah, I mean, like, you experiment and then you realize, oh, I don't like half these jobs. They're getting in the bin. But it's still, being able to make that choice yourself makes it worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. You have more agency.
Yeah, that's
which is something that Final Fantasy II lacked a lot of agency.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it had agency, but it just didn't feel like it mattered.
Yeah. Well, you had no agency in like exploration and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it kind of felt like nothing you did mattered, and that kind of goes into the themes of the game. But it did.
It did
in the end. Yeah.
I think there's always a problem where and funny enough, this is a problem about my favorite Final Fantasy is 10, and this is a problem 10 arguably has. Is I don't like that much when you get to the end game and all characters are the same.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean is, like, conceptually, if you finished Final Fantasy, if you like completed all of the job levels for every character in Final Fantasy 2, like all of the weapon levels, all of the magic levels, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of those characters are functionally identical, and that's boring.
Mm-hmm.
You could use 4 level 99 ninjas in Final Fantasy 3.
Yeah.
But I think the potential for having kind of disparate party members, like interesting builds, it's so much more prevalent in that kind of game. Like the main thing in 10 that distinguishes end game characters is their overdrives, which is like their limit break.
Yeah.
And almost always you'll have the same 3 people in your party because they have the best limit breaks. And it's kind of like, as much as I adore that game, I'm like, I kind of wish that I didn't use these 3 every single time I'm here.
Yeah.
But whenever I play a job system game, it's new. It's different. I've like what's my favorite job system game in this series? Arguably 10.
14.
Oh, if we're counting 14, it's definitely 14. But funny enough, in 14, I actually probably experiment less than I do in any others.
Oh, okay.
I main Sage in Final Fantasy 14.
Okay.
And it's since Endwalker came out, which is like a year and 4 months ago. I love it so much that it's like the only thing I've properly played. And there's 19 jobs, 20 kind of, but really 19 in 14, and I spend 95% of my time on one of them. So it's a weird one, but like in 10-2, which I think is one of the most underrated job systems in any JRPG.
Interesting. I'm excited to get to it.
Oh man, it's great. It looks stupid when you start it. Like
I've heard so many mixed things about it. Like some people hate it and other people love it.
Spira is like my favorite place in the world, like the world of Final Fantasy X. So I'm biased. Don't listen to me.
Okay.
I think it's great. But like every time I've played that game and finished it, which is probably the most of any job system game, I have had completely different experiences every time.
Okay.
And I've played and finished Final Fantasy X an actually unhealthy amount of times, and it always ends the same.
Interesting.
So even though I prefer 10, there's something more
satisfying, rewarding
for the soul.
Yeah.
About ending a game being like, do you know what? That was an experience not only that I've never had, but that arguably no one else has ever had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That was a gameplay experience totally tailored to me, and that feels really nice.
And I think that might be why you're so into Pokemon, too, in general. I mean, that's what that game kind of prides itself on. That's the thing that separates it from other JRPGs, is the fact that your journey is so customizable with the 1,000 of Pokemon that you can have in your party of 6, the moves that you can teach that specific Pokemon. Is it going to be a shiny? What are its IVs? Are you EV training it to be 255 in attack? Things like that. There's so much customization to make it your own journey. And obviously games like Pokemon were highly inspired by, or likely highly inspired by games like Final Fantasy I. Replayability factor of changing your jobs the next time you play. You know, it all kind of feeds into each other.
I mean, I just started the Pixel Remaster because it came out on console the other day. I started 1 again. And again, I think it's maybe the 5th time I've played Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I'm using this specific party. And what's funny is it's actually the basic party. It's the one that it gives you. It's,
okay.
Warrior, Thief, White Mage, Black Mage. And I've never once done it. And it's like, wow, I can't believe I'm having a new experience with this again. Really good. Really nice.
Yeah. It's awesome that you can have a new experience with a game that released that long ago. It's just that level of customization, you know?
But I guess then when you look at 3 after that, you realize, wow, I can really do a lot more with this one. So I think there are like faults to the job system in 3, because of course there are. But is it good? Yeah, it is.
It feels good.
It does feel good. Balancing needs work in every version.
Yeah, for sure.
But overall, like, if you're like, is it fun? Is playing with it fun? Yeah, it absolutely is.
I think my favorite jobs, or the new jobs, I don't even know if there are any other Final Fantasies other than 5, would probably be the Devout and Magus, just because I think they're cute as hell. I love their designs, and they're just better Black Mage and White Mage. Yeah.
The cat ear hood exists.
It's so cute. Oh, it does good. Let's go.
See, that's why you need to play 14. There's a character in 14.
I know.
Who,
I've seen plenty of artwork of 14 characters. Aren't there actual like cat girls in 14 or something?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost like 95% of the player base is grown men being cat girls.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
That's why I got to get into it.
I'm a rabbit. I play a Viera.
Nice. Cool.
It's great. Love it. What game?
All right. Oh yeah, you know what? We didn't talk about it, but this game doesn't have. Whereas 1 and 2 has like ethers, this game doesn't have them.
Yeah.
I wanted to get into the items because it was kind of weird. That elixirs are so hard to come by, and there are no other ways to restore your magic. So when you switch to a magic job and you have no magic spells, it forces backtracking, which sucks, and it's a result of not having the ethers.
I was going to bring that up when you mentioned the magic slots earlier. Because I think you get something like 4 elixirs in the whole game.
That's insane.
That number up. But it's something like that.
I think I only got 4 or something. Yeah.
4 is the number I remember having for some reason. So,
yeah.
But it's the point is it's barely anything. And you're not going to use an elixir like midway through like an early game dungeon just because you've switched from monk to black mage or something.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah.
So you're punished. You're pigeonholed. It's not what you're after. Funny enough, I think that the drawback from this comes from the fact that 3 doesn't use the MP system. Because there are only 3 games in the whole series, main entries, really, that don't have ethers. Is 1, who use the spell slot system, 3, which also uses that same system, and 8, which doesn't
uses,
have MP.
Yeah, it takes
like you can
magic
get, like,
power.
You basically get amounts of a spell.
Yeah.
So you could get like 99 fires or something. It's not like you use 8 and then you can replenish them. You collect them and then you either stockpile them and put them into stats or whatever. But the point is that game doesn't need ethers. It's got a system that doesn't require it. But Final Fantasy II had MP and ethers, and then they took forward gameplay concepts from Final Fantasy II into Final Fantasy III, changed the magic system, but I think it was just an oversight.
Maybe.
They never thought, maybe we could do with a way of replenishing this.
Think about the crystal tower at the end in the original. Like, how... That must be horrible, right?
Yeah, it's grim.
Yeah.
You have a lot of spell charges by that point.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Realistically, you need to know what your party is going into the Crystal Tower, and it has to stay that way until you beat the game. And that's fine. But, like, again, for a game that's meant to be based on reacting, that's awfully boring.
Yeah. And even the Pixel Remaster of Final Fantasy 1 lets you buy ethers.
Yeah, I noticed that. I've not played the Pixel Remaster for 1 and 2 yet.
Okay.
I've played other versions, but not those ones. So I'm
other than the fact that you just got it, right? Like, you just started your playthrough of it.
That's what I mean, I've got to, like, I've just beat Lich, so I'm only like 3 hours.
Yeah, so you can buy ethers in the Pixel Remaster of FF1, but you can't in the Pixel Remaster of FF3.
Yeah.
So
what's going on?
Yeah, I wish that you could, because it would kind of fix that one problem that it has with switching jobs. Just they've patched so many other things into the physical editions of these Pixel Remasters, thankfully, but that was one that they ended up leaving out. So Square Enix, you might want to do that. But then again, maybe not.
Item-wise, I can't think of anything else that stands out as being unusual. I kind of like that. So in the first dungeon of the game, you go to a chest and you can find like an Arctic wind or Antarctic wind.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's cool.
The boss that you fight at the beginning is weak to ice.
Yeah.
And it's meta, it's teaching you. And I like stuff like that. But I don't know if you're the same as me, but I find that by the end of any JRPG, especially if it has like elemental damage items, I just have them all at the end. I
did
just don't really use them.
Yeah. I think it may be worth if you had a really high magic stat with a scholar, right? Yeah, then they would come in handy. Yeah, I never did that. I did use a few of them, though, because, like I said, in those mini dungeons, I only had I still kept my white mage and my black mage. My other two were normal. So
that's fair.
I just used those to damage the things. To damage that rat. I used those items.
Smarter than what I did. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. But that's the only time I can really think of, or unless I ran out of magic spells in a dungeon, because I didn't have it. Actually, now that I think about it, even though you'd be getting more damage off with magic spells with your mages, if you happen to run out, you always have those. If you have a stockpile of them, it does kind of account for that. So there's a thing. You
never get enough for it to be like reliable.
Yeah, not super reliable, but then again, you shouldn't be running out of magic spells that much unless you're switching your thing to a black mage, which does happen a few times, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely a weird balancing thing. I guess I could see why they wouldn't include ethers, but probably give a little bit. Maybe if not buy them, at least get a few of them throughout the overworld, and just a little bit more to find. Could use some tweaking.
There needs to be some other option. The way it is now is punishing for no reason. But I guess it's just one of those things that's endemic to older games like this sometimes, where it feels like they're not trying to make it pleasant for you.
Yeah.
They want you to be playing it as long as possible. So, like, one other thing, again, replaying Final Fantasy 1, I've had to go fully backtrack through 2 dungeons already, and I've only just got the first crystal. And it's like, I forgot I had to do this. Why? Why am I doing this? And it's like, oh yeah, to lengthen the game. And especially like when it was back in the day, and there weren't maps or anything, and you're like, what? Where am I? What am I doing? You'd be there for days. Especially when there was no auto targeting. So it's the kind of thing where it's like, you got to realize that these games had a different purpose.
Yeah.
They're obviously meant to be entertaining, but they're meant to last. And also, I think there's the problem of we're approaching this from a 2020s standpoint. In a lot of ways. A kind of unconscious bias that we couldn't ever really shake is that we're used to a certain level of quality of life.
Of course, yeah.
And I think when it's not there, you can't help but feel a bit hard done by. It's like any other game I played wouldn't do this.
Trust me, I just played Zelda 2.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to hear that. I feel like I entered a different time when I played that thing. But yeah, in Final Fantasy 1, you have to explore everything. At least, here's the thing, is I guess we'll get into it now, right? Because we're kind of talking about this, and we already started, is the exploration in the dungeons. Whereas 1 and 3 incentivize you to actually explore the dungeons. 1 especially, it kind of teaches you that because you're actually rewarded for it, 1, but 2, you need to get all of the items to continue on in the story, to enter certain other dungeons. And in the Pixel remasters, you have maps, so I can actually see exactly what hasn't been explored and what has, thankfully. Which definitely helped ease me into that. Final Fantasy 2 takes the opposite direction and makes it so anything that you possibly explore is extremely punishing and just makes you cry when you play it. And
honestly, the door system in Final Fantasy 2 is one of my least favorite gameplay choices in anything ever.
It really it's the worst.
There's no positive.
No.
I cannot. I'm sure someone could come up with one, but you'd have to really try.
Yeah. But I can't think of it. It just, anytime it came up, when I streamed Final Fantasy 2, I was like, all right, chat, what door are we going into this time? And then half the time it would be the very last thing that I go in. Was the one that puts me forward, and I would get 1 or 2 encounters in every single one of those empty rooms. But 1 and 3 has much better exploration of dungeons. Thankfully, it actually makes you want to see what else you get in these dungeons. You're rewarded for it, and everything like that. So there's that.
I like 3's exploration more than I like 1's. I don't know how to explain it. But 3 feels... How do I word this? When I'm playing Final Fantasy 1 and I hit a dead end, the environment feels like some guy has made it. It's like, oh, this dead end was put here to be annoying. Like, it feels like someone's drawn out the map and they've been like, right, let's put dead end here, blah, blah, blah. And it just feels constructed. It feels artificial. Yeah. And I find when playing Final Fantasy 3, it feels a lot more natural. It still doesn't feel like you're in an actual cave or whatever.
Right.
But, like, it suddenly... I think the structure of the maps, the way that the kind of maps laid out, feels more organic. Because what it felt like was... how do I word this? When you go into the Marsh Cave in Final Fantasy 1, you get popped right in the middle of a map, and there's loads of paths going out from it. Kind of like 6, maybe 5, 4, 5, 6 paths going in different directions, and they each take you to different places. But the thing I think mostly is like, what cave would be built like this?
Right.
It's like, this is impossible. But when you fall into that little cave at the beginning of Final Fantasy 3 and you're making your way through it, it's a simple dungeon, but it feels like you're following a tunnel. You know what I mean? It's like,
it's definitely, like, I would say every single dungeon in FF3 is a little bit more linear, right? Than the ones in Final Fantasy 1, which is, actually, I like it a little bit more. There are parts in Final Fantasy 1, for example, that I can't remember the volcano dungeon.
Mount Gulg.
Yeah, Mount Gulg, where the very last floor, I remember specifically the one on the bottom, the fiend is in the bottom left corner, and I went left, up, left, up. I like checked every single one before, and then the last one was the one I needed to go into, and I got maybe like 1 item for something. Geez, you know, like that stuff doesn't feel
rough.
Yeah, it doesn't feel great, but FF3 does definitely a better job. It's like you don't anytime you go off the beaten path, almost every single time you go off the beaten path in Final Fantasy 3, you get rewarded for it, and it definitely does feel a bit more organic. I agree with you.
I like that design philosophy. I don't really subscribe too much to the idea of like games should punish. I mean, it depends situationally, but like, if I've taken a kind of road if I've gone off the beaten path, I'd hope there's something there, because I'm doing this for fun, you know?
Right.
It's like, I don't want to walk a minute, go through like 4 battles or something to get to somewhere, and there's fuck all waiting for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, oh, good. And it's like, then I'm in a mood walking back. You know, it's just like a stupid game. But if there's even if it's just like a potion, it doesn't have to be anything big. I just want like the tiny serotonin boost from opening that chest.
Nope, you get monsters in that chest. No potions for you.
I don't like that. But you know, you kind of want that something, and I feel like Final Fantasy III often gives you that something.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think dungeon design is, as you say, it's mostly linear. I think it's a bit more organic, but I would say that most dungeons in the game also, because of that, slightly suffer from not standing out.
I was just about to say, I can't even think of what my favorite or least favorite would be, because they all kind of made me feel the same. Like there was nothing. Oh, you know what? I do know what my least favorite one is, but
what is it?
It's closer to the end where you have to. It's the dividing and multiplying enemies.
Oh yeah. In Thalgabard. The Dark Knight Town.
Yeah, I know there's... Yeah. Well, no, it's not, because that one's optional.
Oh, yeah, of course. That one's optional.
Yeah.
What's the one? Oh!
It's like, it's going to Une's or Doga's... It's past Doga's place.
It's the one where you go through to get the airship. Like
yeah, it's where you...
That could be wrong. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, please.
I think there are two. There's one...
Exactly what you mean.
There's one that happens before you can even get weapons for the Dark Knight to actually take down those things. You can take down those enemies from dividing with magic or with the Dark Knight to prevent them from splitting. So there's that one, which I really disliked, before you can even get the weapons for the Dark Knight, and then it was the one past Doga's manor.
Yeah. I know the ones you mean. They're horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I think... This is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think the best dungeon in the game is the Crystal Tower.
Best by what merit exactly? Like, what are you?
That's what I was going to elaborate on.
Yeah.
I think it's the only dungeon apart from Pandemonium and 2, which is aesthetically interesting in the whole first 3 games. The Crystal Tower as a concept is so cool.
Yeah.
Really love it. You're in it. It feels amazing when you're in it. You're like, oh, this is a final dungeon. This actually feels like a final dungeon.
Yeah.
And it isn't even the final dungeon. It's really, really cool. It's too hard. In the 3D remake. It's not too hard in the Pixel Remaster.
Yeah, the Pixel Remaster. Well, in the 3D remakes, you can also... You have those save points after the... Oh, that's not even the Crystal Tower. That's after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the very last, the World of Darkness? I can't even remember what the heck it's called. Yeah, where you have those save points at the end after beating the 4 feet, or whatever the... You know, they're not the 4 fiends, but the 4 fiends.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
The Echidna and all them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if we're talking, like, vibes, still the best word for it, but, the Crystal Tower is definitely the king in that game. Eureka's pretty cool. I don't care for the Labyrinth of the Ancients. And I think the main reason for that, like, it's the one you've got to get through to get into the Crystal Tower.
Oh.
You know, there's that little patch of grass in the crystal, like, if you want to leave the Crystal Tower, not by airship, you have to go through the whole of that dungeon again.
Yeah, you have, well, I know in the Pixel Remaster you have the Crystal Tower and then the thing that's, like, in front of the Crystal Tower, right?
That's the one. Yeah. Annoying.
And then that, like, leads you to Eureka or the Crystal Tower.
Oh, that's like the foyer of the Crystal Tower. Like, that's like the...
Oh, okay.
Because you go in the first floor of the Crystal Tower, and it either lets you go up, or you can go in the door to Eureka.
All right.
mean, there's... It's actually, I think
is it like a lava-looking thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I remember now.
Grim.
That's where is that where you have to fight all the Zonde clones, or is that?
No, that's you fight a Zonde clone every time you open a chest in the World of Darkness.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
It might happen in Eureka as well, but I think I might be making that up. I don't think it does actually. Ignore that. I think it's in the World of Darkness, and like you get ribbons in the chest.
Oh yeah. I did do that. I did do that. Yeah. My brain was like, it's so fuzzy when it comes to a lot of the dungeons in the game.
It's hard to remember all the details in this because it all kind of blurs together.
Oh, one thing before we move on, I do want to say, because I brought this up in my Final Fantasy II podcast, is that if you're gonna play Final Fantasy II, and this is just coming to my brain now, the Pixel Remaster did patch a lot of the stuff that I was talking about in that game with the those goddamn leopards that instantly kill you in Pandemonium and stuff like that. There's a lot of preventions of soft locks that the Pixel Remaster had that are now there, so there's that. I just needed to get that off of me while I remembered them, because now, the Pixel Remasters for the games are out on console, and they fixed a lot of stuff, and they have better font, which is a big thing for me. But yeah,
I mean, realistic. Everyone who played them on Steam,
I modded.
Maybe changed the font.
Yeah, I modded it as well. It was a huge complaint that I brought. I mean, I talked about it a bunch, and thank goodness the actual console releases changed it, because you wouldn't really be able to mod it with. I have no idea. It's not readable at all.
It's not readable. It's a shocking decision.
Yeah.
What annoys me as well is I've changed the font as well on console, but when it's such a minor thing, but when it's auto saving and it says saving in the bottom right corner, it's still in the rubbish thin text, and just seeing it pisses me off.
Yeah.
I'm like, why have you done this? I'm usually really, really chill about these kind of things. I'm quite patient with bad UI doesn't bother me as much as it would bother most people, I think.
Interesting.
But something about this font choice is just bewildering.
Yeah, it's crazy. It just takes me out of the experience. Yeah. I don't know.
Having to squint to read anything.
Yeah.
Taking up like 1/1000th of the text box. Bizarre.
I switched mine to the Final Fantasy VI font. That was the mod that I used. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
The one that's on SNES.
The one I did was I ended up using the Japanese English font.
Yep.
So I can't remember exactly what it is, but like the alphabet exists in the Japanese font set. For whenever they use.
So it's like it's just like wider.
It's just way wider.
Yeah.
It looks appropriate because it's the same kind of font that's being used in the game.
Yeah.
And it fits and everything, but it's just like, if this is an option, why have you made me have to go into the folders?
Yeah.
To do this.
Yeah.
No, wild. Absolutely wild.
All right, so other than the font, there is a few things that we haven't discussed yet, that being the summons and some NPCs to go over as well, unless you want to tackle the NPCs when we talk about story.
No, I think we could probably do NPCs here mostly, because most of the main ones kind of are involved in your party.
Yeah, they were.
The only ones who are really exclusively narrative are Doga, Une, Xande.
Yeah, I guess that's really... Well, they're in your party. Yeah, they're in your party for certain dungeons.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
But they're not like... It's not like FF2 where they take up the 4th party slot and they're...
Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of just there. They give you some flavor text, and most of what happens is kind of narrative, I think, with them, with like Princess Sarah and that ancient...
It's Dash. They just feel like they're there for that bit, and then they come back at the end to save you. And that's kind of what they do.
Yeah.
That's all it really is. I mean, do you know that Dash was meant to be a 5th party member?
I think... Well, no. But I think you might have said something in your video when I watched it, so maybe...
I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah, so in an interview with... I think it was Takashi Tokita, who was actually the guy who kind of a creative force behind 4. So Final Fantasy IV has 5 party members at once. The only time the series ever really does that. And he said that was originally the plan for 3 as well, but it just logistics-wise it didn't really work. And Desh, who is, I'd say, arguably the most interesting of the guest NPCs, the one with the most obvious personality.
He loses his memory, and he's a womanizer, and all this other stuff that happens.
Noble self-sacrifice.
Yeah, then he like remembers who he is. Yeah.
There's lots of cool stuff going on with him. Yeah, he was meant to be your 5th party member, and I'm pretty certain I talked about this in my video. You should look up the concept art for him, because there was an unused version of his kind of design that looks wild. Like, it looks like it's out of Mad Max. It's I saw it.
Amazing. I saw it because it's in the gallery of the Pixel Master.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what Dash is supposed to look like, or what is going on? Yeah.
Imagine these 4 kids and this guy. It's nice, ridiculous, but pretty cool. But the NPCs in this game, I feel like it's a step back from 2, for the most part. 2's got a lot wrong with it, but I think it did a better job of making your guest party members feel like characters in a story. Yeah. I mean, like, realistically, not a single one of the NPCs in Final Fantasy III has an arc that takes place within the events of the game. Obviously, Doga, Une, and Xande, they have stuff going on way before, but, like, Gordon in 2 has a whole arc. He has character development. Probably the first time there's character development in the whole series. It's the same. I mean, Paul has minor character development. Rickard, arguably. Hilda, arguably. But then we get like what's he called? Alice or something, the wee prince in 3.
Oh yeah.
He's being beat up in the pub or something.
There was supposed to be like there's supposed to be a story there about like, now you're the king and you've grown into your responsibilities and stuff. Like, hey, maybe that goes into the entire theme of the game.
It does. I'd say if it's about growing up, it absolutely does. Yeah, but I feel like he feels like a tool for that narrative rather than a character. And it's like he has like a slight friendship with Ark in the 3D remake, but it's so superficial that no one would ever really buy into it. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, these characters just kind of, they're conduits.
They're very one note.
Yeah.
Like Princess Sarah, for example. Like, you can kind of tell that this was going to be some sort of love interest that happens at the very end.
They always, interestingly, I wonder if it's a reference, that one, because when you save Sarah at the beginning of 1, and you talk to her for, like, you can choose to talk to her before you leave Cornelia. She gives you the loot, and then she says, "Oh, you could always stay here."
She does.
I remember saying that, but she did. And I'm wondering if that's, they've got Sarah to do the same thing. And this is totally off topic, but did you ever do the Eidolon Wall side quest in Final Fantasy IX?
Her name is Sarah as well. Is that what you're gonna say? Yeah.
It's just if you
Garnet, by the way, / dagger. Yeah, it's Princess Sarah.
But the coolest thing is that you find out that her mom was called Jane, which is Sarah's mom in 1.
It's so cool. I love this series.
Love that stuff, man. It's the best. But yeah, Sarah. I mean, it's the kind of thing where in 3, if Sarah didn't exist in the game, the impact on the overall story and experience would be almost negligible. And if you apply that same idea to every other NPC, you find out that you kind of you could go without most of them, and you couldn't do that in 2. And I think that's a problem for 3.
Because two was kind of all about loss, and every single one of your party members that you had, they had to do something to contribute to the greater good, and unfortunately, a lot of it was self-sacrificial, and then you saw the results of that by going back into the town. You don't really have much like that. I mean, you still see the results of your actions with those NPCs and how they grow into their roles, right? At least with Alice, or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
And then you see some things happening with Desh, right? Like you bring him back to his lover after he gets his memory back and whatnot. But it's not as impactful to an overall, or to the essence of the story as Final Fantasy II's are, you know?
It's flavor. And all games need flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, like, content. It's like seasoning. Yeah. I don't know. But again, I'm British. What would I know about seasoning? Good joke, me.
Woo! Just kidding.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're gonna get some hate.
I quite like cooking it. That's not beside the point.
What was he cooking?
Yeah, I'm always cooking something. What are we talking about? NPCs.
Yeah.
Doga and Une and Xande are the most interesting.
Yep.
I think, again, not spoiling anything in a future game, but Doga and Une's story, and Xande's to a lesser extent, gets kind of condensed and repurposed in Final Fantasy XIV. There's like stuff to do with the Crystal Tower in that game. And I'm not going to go into anything that happens, but like Doga and Une kind of like, you see there's potential in 3's story, which is something I'll go into later probably. There's so much potential that doesn't get actualized. And parts of this get taken into 14 and actually get, fulfilled. And I think it's interesting that when looking back at 3 for inspiration, like when they were making 14, I think they looked at the characters and thought, Doga and Une are easily the ones that we've got the most to work with here. So I think it's interesting. Like, there was no chance that they were ever going to do, a Sid and Mrs. Sid.
Yeah.
Like, let's do the raid series based on Desh and Selena.
Right.
It's not going to happen. But Doga and Une are really interesting in concept with the whole gifts from Noah thing, Xande mortality. Like the whole shebang. Like the concepts behind all of that is brilliant. But it's just a shame that level of interest is not consistent throughout.
Yeah, I agree. But it's I was still carried through the game with the gameplay alone anyway. It kind of felt like a lot like 1 in that sense, where I don't know, it felt very lighthearted, and I think it was trying to keep that tone of that lightheartedness throughout, and not focus too much on the story, right? Or
well, most of the job games in the series are more lighthearted. 5's definitely, I mean, it has its moments, but it's definitely more lighthearted. Definitely more than 4 and 6.
Yep.
10-2 is lighthearted. I mean, at parts. But I wonder why that is.
Well, I think it has something to do with what you said earlier, where it was like, it's kind of your experience, and you can customize it to your liking, but because you can't give as much locked in place to those characters that you're playing as, they have to be so connected to the story to make it to make an impact, that you can't really do that as well in one of the job games.
I've just remembered, as you've said that's literally an exact point I make in the Final Fantasy IV video, while talking about why 4's story is different to 3's. And I make that exact point, and it just shows you, the second you make content, that stuff is gone.
Yeah, it's gone. It's out of the brain.
It is out.
You've externalized it.
that's never coming back. Because as you said that, I was like, oh, that's a good point. And I'm like, shit, I made that point.
Oh, wait a minute, I did that.
In a kind of different video.
Yeah.
But when I think that's kind of one of the benefits of it's something I said in that game was like, with having characters who have specific jobs, you can tie that job into their personality and then use that to strengthen their characterization and thus the story. So like Cecil being like a dark knight and a paladin. You can apply different, that's linked to the story. But being an onion knight, changing to a, whatever.
Changing to whatever you need at the time, Yeah.
But I think 5 does a much better job than 3, as you'll see, of having a cohesive story that manages not to lean too heavily on job tropes in the protagonists.
Yeah. And then, like in 9, for example, you have a job for every single one of the characters that you play as, but because you can like swap between them so easily anyway, it's like you can be whatever you want, essentially. It's almost like a happy medium in that sense. But even still, the main story obviously revolves around the 4 main characters, and Vivi, Zidane, Garnet, and Steiner. So, yeah. A bug flying around here. I don't know how that got in here. But I guess, what we kind of forgot to talk about is we were talking about exploration, but we didn't talk about Overworld at all. Completely missed it. Yeah. This Overworld kind of blew me away when I booted it up, and I didn't know what to expect. I was in the dark when it came to the place that you were on is the floating island.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. And I left and I was like, oh my god. Well, first of all, everything's flooded, but it was still cool to see, like, oh my god, this is so small in comparison to this big world. They did this on the NES. Like, I was not expecting to see that.
I think my favorite moment in the whole game is flying off the floating continent.
It was so cool.
It's great. And then you realize, because you end up in like the bottom left corner of the kind of it's not underworld, but you know what I mean, like the world below. And then you look at the map and you're like, this is big. And it's really cool. None of the other games didn't quite have anything like that. I like the floating continent as well a lot because I think it's really good size. Everything is condensed. Nothing takes too long to get to, but there's still enough kind of room to kind of feel like you're in a complete world.
Yeah.
I think the balance was struck really well, and then obviously with having kind of a wider world below with a lot of it sea, especially when it's flooded. Really, really interesting. One of my favorite things in the whole game, as stupid as it sounds, is that you can see the tip of the crystal tower just poking out above the flood. Only the top, and it's the only time you ever get to see. I'm pretty sure you can't see the top of it any other point.
You cannot. Because, as soon as the water is gone, you can't see it anymore until you actually get over there. I remember that.
Just thought it was really cool. A really cool detail. Yeah, the overworld aesthetically is probably the game's biggest strength. And I know we'll get into music later, but
oh my god, when I heard that song coming out of that cave, I was instantly hooked into the game.
Wind,
Eternal Wind is beautiful.
Like Final Fantasy 14.
I've heard some of the music from 14. I definitely like it.
They use they like that song in that game. But funny enough, we'll ignore that. We'll save this for music later on.
Okay.
Really cool. Really cool. It's almost like this game's Breath of the Wild moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's such an overused trope, but like that whole kind of going out, seeing the world spread out in front of you.
Yeah.
I get to explore this. I feel like that's that like seeing the flooded world. You're like, oh. I mean, did you ever play Okami?
I have not played Okami yet. But even like Ocarina of Time, like leaving, the Lost Woods, it's all this.
The exact same concept.
Okay.
You do the first 3 dungeons in Okami, you think you finished the game or something.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like you're at like a fifth of the way. You're like, oh yeah, nice.
Nice.
It's that kind of idea, like a good kind of fake ending, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And
like,
I
the journey's
think,
just beginning.
like you were saying, there's just enough space in between those things on the floating continent where it never feels aimless. Like in Final Fantasy II, I felt really aimless on the overworld. I think the game did a not great job at kind of directing you exactly where you needed to go or why. But in Final Fantasy III, it didn't punish you for exploring something. It's like there's something pretty close every single time, and in fact you get an airship pretty goddamn fast, or at least your first one, you know. So I really liked that. And we can go underwater in this game, so it's like there are 3 overworlds. So that's another thing. Once you leave the floating continent, you have like 3 or 4 airships in this game that you go through. But one of them, after it's enchanted by Doga, you can explore the underworld or the underwater, and that gives you access to some summons that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Oh, what an excellent summon. I see what you've done there.
I see. You caught on.
You're a pro. You've been doing this a while.
So that's something that was really cool for me. I remember going into that kingdom and exploring all of it downstairs, but I saw a knight or something that was just in another place of the map that I couldn't access. I was like, how the hell do I do that? How the hell do I get over to him? What is that? Right? And then I forget the kingdom name. You talked about it earlier. Saronia. Yeah, sorry. I'm so bad with the names. And then you dive underwater, and lo and behold, that's exactly how you go fight Odin. And if you prove your worth to him, then you can use him as a summon, which then now you have a reason to use like a summoner job. And man, it's so cool. Love it. Unfortunately, the underwater segment doesn't have too much for you to explore, but it has enough. It has some like treasure places, and it has the Odin. And there are a few other summons you can get too. Titan, right?
Titan's one of the ones you just buy.
Okay.
The other 2, it's Leviathan
and Bahamut.
But Leviathan and Bahamut, yeah. They're and Odin, like they're the 3 that you have to kind of find. I think at least that's how I remember it. So like I like one of the things I like about Leviathan is you go back to the floating continent, is Lake Dor, and you can actually see Shadow swimming in the lake that you can never access any other time. So like something's there as well, like you do with Odin. And obviously you get a clue with Bahamut when he appears. When you're at the top of the mountain with Dash.
With Dash,
So like the game does a really good job of setting these things up, giving you a clue of where to go to get these. And obviously there's like little towns and stuff. I can't think what the town is called, but there's a little summoner's town, evoker's town, whatever, in somewhere in the world where they basically have little songs that give you hints for where all the summons are. Really cool. And obviously, summons are one of the biggest parts of Final Fantasy. I mean, so many of the games, like 8, 9, and 10, their stories are all based on summons. Like GFs, the summons from 8, are absolutely crucial to the narrative. 9, Garnet's a summoner, the whole thing. 10, Yuna, the main character in 10 is Titus, or Titus is meant to be, I'm saying Titus. I don't like Titus. But realistically, Yuna is the main character of that game. That's my opinion on it, and you're getting summons the whole game, she's a summoner. It's like, the series wouldn't exist without summons. It's one of the things that when I started playing 8, getting all of the GFs was what hooked me in the most. And like leveling them up, I was like, man, I love this part of it. And that actually gave me like a lifelong interest in like looking up mythology and stuff.
That's awesome.
And it's like the impact that, and then you go back and you see that like all of the best ones started here. Like I think there's only 2 missing. I think I say this in my video actually. Like we've got Shiva, Ifrit, or Ifrit, or however you meant to say it, Ramu, Titan, Leviathan, Odin, and Bahamut. Like for 7 summons to be in the game, that's like the best 7 you could pick probably. I think the only ones that are missing are Phoenix, who plays a big role in a few of the later games, and Alexander. Who
I was gonna say, yeah, Alexander in 9. That cutscene blows me away every single time.
That is amazing.
So sick. But you forgot Mega Bahamut and Giga Bahamut.
There's two Neo.
Neo. Yeah.
I feel like an old person who's like, I don't want those newfangled Bahamuts.
Yeah.
Nah. I actually. Yeah, it's interesting seeing because there's a lot of you'll see when you play 6. 6 introduces a lot of summons, and almost none of them caught on.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot of staying power in the ones that were introduced here.
Wait, was Shiva and Ramu in 3? I don't remember when. Oh, I can't remember my playthrough of it. Did I get them? Can you buy them at the end, or do you?
You can buy the first 4 immediately. But they're called,
okay.
Spark.
That's what it is. Yeah, I did get Spark. You're right. I did. Yeah.
But obviously, if you use that just with an evoker, it's not going to be as interesting because you don't get to use the an ultimate ability, Judgment Bolt.
Yeah.
Judgment Bolt.
Judgment Bolt is Ramu's. That's his signature move. Yeah.
I've got confused there because Alexander's is Holy Judgment, and I was like, is there a Judgment too? Anyway. The summons are amazing. The designs are cool. I don't think any of them are the most iconic of that summon design. But, I think of all the things that were introduced in the first 3 games, this is the most important. For, like, the series' future, for its identity.
Other than, like, the job system?
Yeah, But I reckon...
extra, like extra stuff on top. Like, you would say... Chocobos, Moogles, and stuff like that. I mean, 2 introduced the Chocobo, but
I genuinely think this is more important.
I mean, I would say it's more important because of like how important they are in story and stuff like that too.
But I guess the Chocobo and the Moogle are so much more emblematic. I just I feel like it's almost like when they realized how much potential there was in the summons, it completely changed the direction of the whole series in a way that nothing else ever did. Because every Final Fantasy game feels different, feels new, feels like they wanted to try something else. And I feel like the one thing that really never changes is Shiva's going to do Diamond Dust.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, Shiva's going to do Diamond Dust.
It's just it's good to have this kind of grounding feature.
Yeah,
where you're like, oh yeah, Ifrit's turned up, we know exactly what's happening, and that it needs that. Obviously, you get chocobos and stuff, but realistically, big fire demon shooting a meteor at you is cooler than a big bird.
Whoa! You're gonna get some comments. We're gonna see those people following along right now that are gonna.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad. It's true though. I like what of all of the chocobos in the series. Do you have a game that has your favorite iteration of the chocobo? I know this is off topic.
I have a golden chocobo.
Oh, that's a good answer.
7.
That's a nice to get.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But I want to say the amount of stuff that they do in 9 with the chocobos.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like what they do, and the fact that you can like ride them and stuff in 15, right? That's cool.
Yeah.
Even though I never even did that. So
in I don't think you've played any of the 13 games, right?
Nope, not yet.
My pick for most underrated Final Fantasy game is 13-2. And in that game, you get these kind of like rogue chocobos. I think they're called rambunctious chocobos, and they're red. And you need to look up the song that plays when you're on.
Yeah.
It's like a metal.
I've heard it.
It's so good. You get on it for the first time, chocobo looks mad, and then it just starts playing this, and you're like, oh, this is the best chocobo experience I've had in 20 years of playing these games. Absolutely amazing. But I guess one massive thing, chocobo-wise, that happened in 3 was the extension of the chocobo theme.
Yeah.
In Final Fantasy 2, it was only the first few bars or whatever. And it just repeated without ever getting interesting. And you felt like you were going to lose your mind about 45 seconds into the song. But now
Yeah.
like there's an extra measure in the 1 and 3, and it's probably the biggest quality of life change that could have ever happened.
Now we get the oh my, I can't even think of the second measure now. Where is it? Yeah, you're right. I was like singing it in my head, but then when I went to go externalize it, for some reason I completely forgot it.
That's the most common thing ever. Honestly, how eloquent everyone probably sounds in their own head, and you just start speaking, and you're like, I'm an idiot. But
yeah, 100%. And speaking of that, I guess we should talk about the fact that you can kind of run into the little chocobo forests all over the place in Final Fantasy III. I only remember you seeing them once in 2.
Yeah, I feel like they're barely a feature in 2.
Yeah, but in this playthrough, I don't think they're as needed in as many places as they are, because you have the airships for most of the time. But you can always go into, I mean, you know what it looks like. It's like a tree surrounded by a bunch of trees. You approach that, and then it's a chocobo forest, and then you can ride them wherever, which is cool. And also, there's the
fat chocobo.
Yeah, I was about to say we get the fat chocobo too, which again I didn't even use because I just had everything in my inventory since it's limitless anyway, right?
Is it limitless? Because I feel like in one of the versions I played, at least, maybe it was the 3D version then, I feel like I had to use the fat chocobo quite a lot.
I mean, I don't think it's limitless, but if I have 99 high potions or something like that, then I mean, I guess I could have used it to, I don't know, I could have like bought them and then stored them with it and then bought another 99 or something. But my inventory, like, you can have as many single items as you wanted. Like, I could have as many swords, as many books, as many whatever. So I mean, you're right, I should have used them for like some of the regular items though, the perishables.
Are you an equipment seller? When you think you're not going to use a weapon or armor anymore, do you get rid of it?
Not until a little bit more later in the game than probably some people would.
Sure.
But yes, it's actually one of the reasons why I like 9 so much, is because everything's kind of usable always.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But in 3, once I've locked in, if I'm not going to use this job and I happen to get this equipment in one of the chests, I'm selling it.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Or like some of the old stuff, like getting like a bronze bangle when I have like 4 silver ones already. Why am I ever going to switch back to a bronze one? So I'm going to sell that one.
I'll always sell all but one. I don't know. I feel like it's a completionist thing that's inbuilt in me.
Mm-hmm.
Is I don't like the idea of selling like you get a buckler or something, and it has no worth. I just don't have it in me to get rid of it. I don't. It just doesn't feel right.
So you store it with the Fat Chocobo instead?
So I store it in Fat Chocobo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's out of my way, and I don't have to look at it. But I've for some reason, if I wanted to ever have it.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I guess. I mean.
I don't think.
I mean, there are some things I do that with, but then later I'll be like, okay, I'll sell all but one, and then when I'm confirmed that I'm not going to use this, then I'll sell it. But I'm not going to hold on to it until the end. If there's something that I can buy that I know I'm going to be using, then I'm going to sell it to get that thing. You know,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I totally get what you mean. It's also kind of what's the word? Shoot. Like, you become emotionally invested in the items that you have. I don't know why I can't think of the very obvious word that it's used for this, but it makes you not want to. Huh? Oh yeah, I know, but there's a specific word. I don't know why I can't think of it. No, sentimental. There it is.
Oh yeah, got you.
Yeah. You can get sentimental with a lot of the stuffs you went on your journey with, and I feel like a lot of people do that. Like, it's not, I don't think it's just a you thing, right? And even if it is strictly completionist, I feel like people do it for different reasons. Yeah, for sure. So I guess we can get on to talking about story now. I think we've gone into almost everything gameplay that we possibly can.
Yeah.
Right? So what is the story of this game?
That's a great question, man. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's vague. I think it's the kind of thing where I remember when I made the video for the game, I played it twice in a row, rewatched both playthroughs, and then when it came to writing, I was looking up plot synopsis stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what happened? It's like it just didn't ever stick for me. Playing Final Fantasy IV, for example, a plot heavier game, I play it once and it's all there. But this game is so vague, so nebulous, that I find it really hard to understand the nitty-gritty details underpinning almost any major event.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's the 4 crystals, chosen children, like save the world, prophecy, warriors of light, darkness, hope.
Yeah.
The whole early stage JRPG shebang. But I think the problem with it is that you don't find out what happens. Like, you don't actually learn the plot, really, until, like, the last half hour. When you get to the world of darkness, and you learn about the crystals of darkness and the warriors of darkness.
Yeah.
And then you meet these 4, and they lore dump everything on you at once, as if that instills it with meaning. And I remember thinking, like, I still don't know what's going on. I feel like the language is it's not flowery, but it's too imprecise. And even at this point, having played the game multiple times and made an hour-and-a-half long video on it, if you said sum up the story in a few sentences, I actually couldn't.
I totally agree. It's other than there being 4 orphans and you being destined, you're chosen by the power of light to be, the warriors of light and restore balance to the world. There's not much going on there until the very end. There are hints toward what's happened in the past, which play into what you're currently dealing with, but there's not much there narratively, right? It's just more of like an overarching thing that happens, and then you just tackle it all at the end, right? Yeah. And so as far as what happens in the story, you're 4 orphans, you're the warriors of light, you go restore, or with the last of the crystal's power, gives you like new jobs that you're storing their power, and as you do that, you see the changes in the world around you, like in real time, which is really cool. Yeah. Like you see the continents rise back up from the flood. In the past, there was a flood of darkness, which is what you're trying to fight right now. And then Noah gives powers to Xande, Une, and Doga, right? Yeah. And Xande was given the power of the gift of mortality, whereas the other 2 were given probably much better gifts, but more. I mean, mortality
was given mastery over magic, and Une was given power over dreams.
Yeah, and then you're like, you get to die. How's that? Yeah, sucker.
He's like, well, the whole premise of the game is that he's mad about it.
Yeah.
I think this leads to probably the most interesting part of characterization in the whole game, which is that, again, I feel like I'm just repeating points I've already made, but Xande's villainy stems from fear, which is way more interesting than like the Emperor in 2, or Garland, and kind of like Garland, but more interesting than Garland. It's human, it's relatable. Not wanting to die is probably the most base instinct anything has. And going to great lengths to prevent your own death is probably the most understandable cause to do anything. And that is such a good basis for a villain. Never put into practice, never used fully.
Hated when you approach him and you actually get to him in the Crystal Tower and he says nothing about it. It's like, it's just told to you from Une and Doga that this is what happened. He's not. And fear is the number one motivator in anything that's alive. No, it forces you to do every single action that you think that you do. It's all based off of survival for the most part.
Yeah.
Right? So seeing something so primal and so raw be the thing that takes everything down around you, like you said, is a beautiful concept. But then in practice, you get to him and he doesn't say anything about it. He's just like, power of darkness will prevail. And then you fight him and it's like, oh my god, this sucks. Why? Why'd you do that? You were so close.
Really annoys me.
Yeah. And then he wasn't even the big bad. It was just a amorphous woman with titties that called the Cloud of Darkness. I don't know how it looks really, in other...
it's really weird because, I mean, it is. But, like, why?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they constantly... the Cloud of Darkness refers to itself as we.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Which is interesting. And, you know, the concept of the void. I think... something, again, I've said before in my video... I really like, despite how cliche it is, whenever JRPGs do the whole villain wants to destroy the world thing. Just like it. Just think it's fun. This is one of the worst examples of it. I still like it, but it's just like, oh, I'm the void, and I want to return all to the void because void. I'm just thinking, no.
Yeah.
It's just like I wish I could engage with this more, but for the fact that like you've said your piece, and then the Warriors of Darkness say their piece about like there needs to be balance. I'm like, cool. And it's like, oh, I'll return everything to the void. I'm like, probably not.
Yeah.
It's like, God, why is this so shallow? Because everything in this has potential to be good. If utilized correctly. It's what I said before, that Final Fantasy III is the definition of a game that is good in concept and less good in practice.
Yeah.
Again, this Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers uses these ideas, shows you how good it can be, because that game's fucking great. And it just, especially when you go and see something like that executed so well and you come back to this, and you're like, wow, this is actually even more amateurish than I thought.
It sucks because it is frustrating because there are like two overarching themes in this game, and one of them I feel is growing up, and the other, three. Two is this balance between light and darkness, and the third is the essence of hope in nothingness.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
And the Cloud of Darkness and kind of embodies that. Because it's like the Warriors of Dark and the Warriors of Light have one thing in common, that it's hope. It's the hope that's the one thing that's going to destroy that extreme nihilism, or like everything returns to nothing idea that the Cloud of Darkness, that we, with the negative thoughts or spirits of whatever in the world past, is trying to bring everything to. So... It does stink that it was done so. I think the growing up one was done relatively well, if that was intended, and then the other two were just kind of hinted at. But it is, I mean, when you look at it from a bird's eye view and you just think about the themes, it's like, yeah, that's cool. But when you're actually going through it and the pacing of those things, it's not there as much as you'd like it to be. It's not as present. So
no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's something, again, that I think I'm just repeating from my video, but it just comes to my head, is Final Fantasy III fails narratively at two things that Final Fantasy 1 and 2 succeed at, which is interesting. And it's like, if we look at it from like a micro and macro perspective, Final Fantasy III lacks cohesion between place to place. You feel like you know what your task is. You're restoring the crystals, but you don't really know what that means. You're restoring balance, but you don't really know what that means. But you go from town to town doing, task and task, and none of it feels that connected. In Final Fantasy 1, it does feel connected. You go to Melmond, where the Earth Crystal is near, and everything's ruined.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, well, can you help? Blah blah. And I feel like it has a level of cohesion between kind of the world and the narrative that 3 never quite has, which is unusual because 3 is narratively better than 1. And So that's the micro. And on the macro, 2 begins with the Emperor raising Finn. And you're like, well, we're gonna take this guy down.
Yeah. This is clearly the bad guy. We gotta take him down. Yeah.
The whole game. That's the one. There's one aim. There's one aim for the entirety of Final Fantasy II, and it's destroying the Empire. And he keeps on doing worse and worse stuff.
Yeah.
And he keeps on consolidating your idea that we need to kill him. He's evil. And then eventually you do it, and you're like, sick, nice, done it, amazing. Final Fantasy III's macro is we need to restore the 4 crystals. I need more info. I need more context. That's not enough to go on, especially when everything else is like prophecy nonsense, like poorly translated as well. And it's just you can fill in gaps, of course. These games expect you to do that, but I don't even think you can fill in these gaps fully.
Because you don't, you all you know is that you're chosen and that you have to restore the crystals for that entire time, basically, that you're on the floating continent, and you don't feel connected to it at all until that continent raises. Which, to be fair, isn't too much. Doesn't take too much time after you leave the floating continent, but that's still like one of the only times where you see a difference in your actions.
Yeah.
Where
definitely.
you actually feel like you're on that journey to restore the crystals and what that even means and what it does. And then even later, you understand why or how it even happened in the first place and what you're trying to stop. But it's not until much later in the game. So
it feels like a story has failed in a way if every element of it has to be explained to you in kind of ham-fisted, like, forced exposition from other characters. And even after they've done it, you don't know what's happening.
Or you just don't care that much because you've gone all this time without knowing, you know?
It's like Doga was like, oh, Xande was made mortal, so he got angry and he flooded the world. And it's like...
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
And then you find out, oh, well, actually, it was water, but also it was time. Like, everyone was fine. They were just underwater, but alive, but fine, but dead.
Yeah, that's one thing that I was confused about when I played it, because it says that it's flooded, and it looks like water, and then everyone, you wake up in this town that you've lifted, and all of a sudden everyone's okay. I was like, well, you should be dead if this was water.
No memories. And it's like, where were you? I think they turned to stone or something.
Okay.
I think there's some bit of dialogue where everyone turned to stone. Just like, oh, that's so bad. It's like I love the series, and I like every game in the series realistically. This one included. But I feel like you got to be honest. Like, that's poor. The writing there is of a low standard.
You should have at least seen some damage in their houses, bro. They're back to dancing. I mean,
it's just, I think they maybe in the remake, when you see the flood, it looks less like water. It looks like I don't know, weird darkness gunk. Like it's like a gross kind of effervescent potion looking thing. And I guess that kind of brings the idea that maybe what we're flooded with here isn't strictly water, but it's just bad vibes.
Yeah.
And, but then you fix the water crystal, and all of it goes away. So so it was water. It's like, so wait, so what is it? Is it bad vibes or is it water? It's like, it's bad. It's water with bad vibes. It's like,
it would have been cool if they just stuck with the bad vibes thing, because that plays more thematically into your hope being the thing that stops
100%.
all of the hopelessness. Or like this running away from death and stuff like that, but nothing ever happens with that with the characters in the towns or anything like that. We never get to see how they would have changed in those bad vibes. Instead, like you said, they're just stone, and then you save it, and we're all dancing to music that you can play on the piano.
Yeah, that happens immediately after. You're playing tunes in the pub. Yeah. Oh man. That's a weird dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
One thing as well, I guess a theme that we didn't mention that could play a role is sacrifice. there are multiple instances throughout the game of characters sacrificing themselves for the purpose of hope, for the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
So like Desh in the Tower of Owen, Doga Anune, the Four Warriors of Darkness. I guess it's an interesting one.
The woman that you first, I mean, that wasn't even intentional, right?
Arya?
Arya, right? Yeah,
I think
Arya.
she's murdered.
Yeah, it's not much of a set. Yeah. They try to shoot you, but they kill her instead.
But then again, now that I'm thinking about it, is that one of those deals where it's gonna hit you and she like pushes you out of the way?
That's true.
Sacrifice.
Yeah. Does she do that?
That's now. I'm wondering if I've completely fabricated this now, because
I can't remember.
Before this, I was like, I'm pretty sure she was just shot, but now I'm wondering if she kind of does a look out, and
yeah, because she is behind you, right?
Yeah, I think she pushes you forward. Maybe I'm just embellishing this, but
let us know.
That's interesting
in the comments.
Yeah, please let us know. But that's an interesting idea. Because I think the whole idea of selflessness, embracing death for the sake of a greater good, as kind of grim as that sounds, goes against the whole idea of Xande's fear of his mortality.
Oh
which is
yeah,
the whole basis for villainy in the game is he's scared of death. He's he's not willing to face the consequence that everyone else has to face. Yeah. But then you see other people who are like, if it means that we make a greater world, then, I'll pay a price.
Oh, man, it's so good from a bird's eye view, like thinking about it retroactively, but goddamn, when you're going through it, you don't know any of that.
No, it doesn't land.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to do this kind of retrospectively. So
I love doing it. I love talking about it. And
no, you're never playing the game and thinking, do you know what? This is so it's so cogent. Like, oh, look at how well the sacrifice theme plays against the. It just doesn't happen because it's you need the bird's eye view that you mentioned to make any sense of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird story. I think could have been good, isn't. But again, you see that it can be good in later Final Fantasies.
Yeah,
all of the kind of wee bits they take and adapt. I mean, even the Xande Cloud of Darkness idea is mimicked in 9 with Necron.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very, very similar theme, and it works a lot. And people talk about
that game.
Yeah, people talk about how that final boss comes out of nowhere, and while they're technically right, if they're looking at the entire theme of the game, that's the perfect final boss.
When I first played Final Fantasy IX, when I was like 9 years old, I got to Necron and I was like, "Who's this?"
Right.
But then you play the game as like a teenager, an adult, and you're like, "All right."
Yeah.
I was paying attention this time, and also I wasn't 9. And then suddenly you're like, "Oh right, of course. Well, of course this is the case." But 3 does not do enough of the work to make it make sense. It's like I think there might have been like 1 or 2 mentions of the Cloud of Darkness before. I'm trying to think actually.
I do not remember one.
I think there's only one, and I think it's when you get the Earth Crystal, which is the last crystal. They mention the Crystal Tower, and I think they mention the Cloud of Darkness once. And I think that's the only mention of it beforehand.
Okay.
And also, you only hear about Xande. You never meet Xande before you see him at the end.
Yeah.
So it's like all of the stuff that happens at the end, meeting Xande, meeting the Cloud of Darkness, there's no context for it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why do I give a shit? And you're like, I don't care. Oh, man. Something else that, but no other game after it fumbles like it.
Yeah.
I think it's the only main series Final Fantasy I think that really doesn't do the job right story wise. 1 doesn't count because it doesn't have a story, but I think 2 does it right, and I think all the others do.
Yeah.
And it's when you like. Apart from 11, I've finished every main series Final Fantasy, and looking at them all from this bird's eye view, you're like, wow, that does stand out as being the not goodest of them all.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
It does stink to see, yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, sorry,
go on. Oh, okay. I was just gonna say that I still think that the game is a pretty damn good game, regardless.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
It's like it's a kind of spoiler for my like overall conclusions, but it's like it's almost every single thing you pick, you're like, oh, let's talk about this specific thing. I'm like, I'm gonna pick holes in it. And then it's like, what's your overall feeling? Is this a good game? And I'm like, yeah, it's a good game.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
The story is pretty rubbish. But like everything else, you know, although it's flawed, it's, you know, it's an early game. Is the game enjoyable from a kind of overall perspective? Yeah, absolutely it is. It doesn't need the story to be good. It's one of those kind of games where the story it happens to be there, and if you want to look into it, you know, you probably aren't going to get much out of it. But as you said earlier, that this game basically carries itself on gameplay.
Yeah.
Thank God it does, because if it didn't, then it'd probably be the worst Final Fantasy.
If it had like 2's gameplay with this story or something like that, yeah,
I would be a.
I don't think I would enjoy it at all.
This would be the worst one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But thankfully the gameplay carries it pretty well, and you know we haven't gotten to like music or anything yet, but you know,
which we can get into right now.
Oh my god, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, sure. So, man, I think this is where Uematsu really got a hold of the sound chip of the 100%. Famicom, and I mean the compositions are quite complex for the time. Every single one is a banger. The battle theme is an absolute banger. It's my favorite one out of the 3. The overworld theme, it invokes just the perfect feelings of this, like not knowing exactly what's going on, but still feeling kind of adventurous.
Yeah.
And the Cloud of Darkness is a bop.
Oh, that's such a good song, man.
Yeah.
The final boss battle theme is the best. So for me, until we get to Dancing Mad in 6, it's the best boss battle theme of the first 5 games.
Wow. Okay.
For me, it's so good. It's such a bop. It's just it's like funky almost. Yeah. I mean, the final battle from 4, brilliant. The ones from 1 and 2, I think, are less good. And I actually don't love the kind of X-Death themes too much from 5, but oh man, it's unbelievable. It's such a good song. I was gonna say about Eternal Wind, the Overworld theme. One of my favorite things about it is that you would always expect how do I word it? There's kind of like a melody in the foreground and a melody in the background. You would expect the melody in the foreground to be the more busy one, the more involved one, and the one in the background to complement the busy melody. But the melody in the background of Eternal Wind is like the and then there's like a which is quite calm, quite like restrained. And that is actually the predominant melody in the song. And it's got this mental thing in the background. And then I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. Because that's really atypical. It's not actually typical for Uematsu, as we see later down the line.
Right.
But, you know, for like that kind of theme, you would always expect you'd always expect it to be the other way around. And I feel like there's it links to the themes of the game. All the main themes, all the overall themes in the series link to the ideas and themes of the game in question. And that one is to do with, like, it takes the whole freedom thing. It's definitely the most kind of hopeful, the most optimistic. And it's because sorry, didn't say one thing. And it's the most it has the most momentum. I don't know how to explain this. but it's
it
the only
does
one that
because
pushes
of
you.
that. It's because of that backing track. It's
Exactly,
constantly
the speed of it.
moving. Yeah.
But when you isolate the leading melody, it's almost like not sad, but you know what you were saying about the whole growing up thing?
It's bittersweet.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially the second. I don't know if it's the second, but it's boo da doo 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 doo, and then
Yeah.
doo 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 doo.
Like,
it's that. Doo.
Imagine, yeah, that could be a ballad.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but you've still got that, peppy.
Yeah, you have the movement that's still it's pushing the entire composition forward through the bittersweet feelings that you're currently going through, given this job to stop these crystals.
It's the ultimate theme for like persevering through difficulty.
Mm-hmm. A good way to put it. Mm-hmm.
And do you know what my controversial take is? It's the worst of the 3 overall themes in the game.
Wow,
and it's
really?
Still a bop.
You think it's the worst one? It's my favorite one out of the 3.
It is great.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But the Boundless Ocean, which is the song that plays on like when you get to below the floating continent and you see the flood, you're flying over it. That song is amazing. It is so sad. It's just
is that the doon 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 doon? Does it start with that?
Oh wait,
what is that?
Maybe the backing does. It goes
yeah. Yeah.
Or something like that. Apologies that you had to hear that. But it's when it starts, you're like, oh, I'm sad now.
Yeah.
Oh. It's like going from Eternal Wind the whole time on the floating continent to that is such like a almost out of place tonal change. It's like this is it couldn't be a more different vibe, and I can't tell you how much I love that. It's so good. It just sums everything up perfectly. And I guess the other Overworld theme for me is the underwater theme, which I feel like is probably my pick for the most underappreciated song in the game.
I can't even remember it because I didn't go underwater that much.
You should go look it up. It's called either Deep Under the Water or the Nautilus or the Submarine Nautilus.
Okay.
It's gorgeous. It's like a lullaby almost. It's so soft. It's so gentle. And you just realize how good he is at making music which is evocative within the first 2, 3, 4 seconds.
Yep.
Like you have, it's not like you get the feeling as the song goes on. The song starts, you're hit with it immediately, and then you get to enjoy the rest of the song in that feeling. He's a genius.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. 100%. I mean, and it's really cool, and I brought it up in a couple of the other Final Fantasy podcasts that we've done, but to see I recognize his style because, obviously playing games like 9 and 7, and then going back to play 1 and 2 and 3 and hearing the town themes, it's like I wouldn't even have to know who did it to know who did it, Yeah. It's you just know with the way that he captures you in the melody itself and the certain way. I mean, I don't want to say it's like there are leitmotifs between the different town themes and everything, but it's just like the melodic structure that he tends to use is you just instantly know who it is. You know the style, and I love to see it. And speaking of which, I do like the town theme of the game as well. I think it's really pretty. Yeah.
I especially like Amur. It's got, I think, Town of Water, Amur. You'd find it on the soundtrack, which is the place that you wake up after the flood. You've fixed the flood. And again, it's just a really understated but gorgeous tune.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't really think he has many bad songs. In the entire in the hundreds he's done. There's filler music in the first 3 games. I think songs that realistically no one's like, oh, I'm going to go listen to this one. No one's doing that. I think a lot of the dungeon themes in 3.
Yeah,
are
yeah.
forgettable. Like the Tower of Owen, I don't care for. I don't like the Castle Hein music very much. Obviously, Crystal Tower is a bop. Eureka's a bop. World of Darkness is a bop. But like, there's a bit more filler. But the later games don't have any filler. It's just like 100 of the best songs you've ever heard in your life. What is your favorite song in the game? Would it be Eternal Wind?
I think so. It's probably Eternal Wind or the battle theme. Like even the normal battle theme. I think I just like it so much. It's like every single time I got into a battle, I was singing the melody for it, and I was like beatboxing and everything. Like everyone who was there for the stream could attest to it. It is really, really nice. But it's always hard to choose for me. It's between Eternal Wind, the battle theme, and probably Cloud of Darkness. But I like the airship theme as well. Even though I can't remember it off the top of my head, because I'm like, am I getting confused with the first one? Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Like, is that from FF3 or is that FF1? I can't even remember now.
I can remember now.
But
yeah, I've been put on the spot. I have no idea.
I'm like
to a single airship theme.
Yeah. By the way, the Invincible, cool airship that's also in Final Fantasy IX, the final one that you get. There's another little reference between the two.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's a bit scarier in 9.
Yeah. It is. Oh, you're trying to find the song?
The airships, yeah, sorry. The airship, I know I just needed to hear the first second. The airship's song you're talking about is the one from 3.
Okay, yeah, I definitely like that one. It's really cool. But probably, I know it's kind of... Oh, I like Arya's song as well.
I'm glad we got there.
Yeah.
That's my favorite song in the game.
Okay. Yeah, it's really nice.
I say in my video, I think it's the first Uematsu like masterpiece. Where you're like, wow, you're a different breed. This is crazy. Because it's like, I think one thing people don't often think about is the first character theme in the whole series.
Yeah, I can't think of another one.
For a character who dies 10 minutes after you meet them.
Weird. Maybe, were they supposed to play a bigger role before? Because it was kind of strange.
The game took up a lot of space. They were pushed to the limit, so maybe they had to cut some stuff.
Final Fantasy in a nutshell, pushing consoles to their limits.
Yeah. But that song is, for me, the most complex song in the whole soundtrack. Like the change in movement from like the first kind of movement of it to the second movement, is unbelievable. It's the most tragic piece of music. It's like heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I don't know how he does it. There's especially the DS version and the Pixel Remaster version. It's great on the NES. He does an amazing job with the sound chip. But when you see kind of orchestrated versions or kind of like remastered versions that can play a bit more with what he built, you suddenly see all the potential that this had. You could see what was in his head when he was making it, and you're like, wow, that's like transcendental. That's absolutely amazing. I don't know if this has come across, but I am a big fan of his.
Yeah, me too.
No. And do you know what another really great song from the soundtrack is? Which I never appreciated until I played 14. It's called Now I Know the Truth, or Let Me Know the Truth. It depends where you find it. And it's Doga and Une's theme. And it's the one that it goes like a...
I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
Oh!
It's a terrible... I'm doing a terrible impression.
Well, I don't know. I feel like I should be able to get it from that regardless.
It starts with like a cute little like ding 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 ding, and then it goes into this.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, you do encounter it for the first time when you meet Doga in the. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yep. I remember. It's kind of like lighthearted and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never cared about this song. And then I saw it, same for the Crystal Tower theme actually, and then I saw it in a different context in a different game. Again, 14. And then when I came back to playing 3, because I played 3 for the first time when I was 16, 17 on the DS.
Yeah.
And then I played Final Fantasy 14 for the first time, well, properly for the first time. I played it when it came out, but then again later, maybe like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 6 or 7 years after I played 3 for the first time. And then I heard this music. And then when I came back to 3 to make the video, and I was hearing these songs, now not only with the Final Fantasy 3 context, but the Final Fantasy 14 context, I was suddenly like, getting emotional. And it's kind of goes back into a game that realized the potential of Final Fantasy 3, giving me reason to care about the context behind this music. Like in again, there's the Crystal Tower is in 14, and anyone who's played Shadowbringers will know that there's like a room you go in this place where that song plays. And when you think about that song now, it means something entirely different. And what's great is now there's 2 different places, completely disparate, where I think this song plays a part. And that shows the incredible utility of the music. That, like, it's not just stuck in the moment that it was intended for. It can transcend that.
Totally.
And have meaning in other places. Really cool. And do you know what the best part is? This is one of his worst soundtracks. And it's
it's crazy.
Amazing.
Actually, you know, that reminds me is so I think something that was missing from Final Fantasy II was the main theme of Final Fantasy, which was brought back in Final Fantasy III, and talk about a song that you can use in so many different areas. Yeah. God damn, every time I hear the Final Fantasy main theme play in one of the other games, it's so emotionally driven. I love it so much. And you know what? The distorted version of it that plays when you approach the Wind Crystal, that's another song that I really appreciate. It's like it's the prelude, but all messed up and augmented and
because it gets like, it climbs the arpeggio, but never goes back down. It just goes like up and then up and then up. It's unsettling.
It reminds me of the Crystal World in Final Fantasy IX at the end. Yeah.
I think it's meant to.
Yeah, probably.
It's very cool. Amazing. It's just so good. I'm trying to think what other songs there are now. I've mentioned all the ones I like thought about saying. But all of them are so good.
Yeah. I love them. I was bopping out to the soundtrack the entire time. I really enjoyed it. Okay, and with music out of the way, I think there's one more question to ask, and that's whether or not the game is worth playing today and how it carries the legacy of Final Fantasy. So, I want to hear your opinion before I go ahead and say my own.
Thank you. So, I think that the short answer, is it worth playing today? Yes. But I think you should know what you're in for. It's like, if you're wanting to play a Final Fantasy game for a job system, you shouldn't play 3. If you're wanting to play a Final Fantasy for any other reason, you probably shouldn't play 3. So why would you play 3? This is the weird thing. Final Fantasy 3 is a game whose value, whose worth, is almost entirely based outside of it. So, Final Fantasy III has had an indelible effect on almost every game in the series that came after it.
Yeah.
To the point where, without Final Fantasy, you realize Final Fantasy III has an importance that almost no other game in the series does. You could argue, depending on your perspective, it might sound a bit silly, that although it doesn't stand out in a lot of ways, it could be the most influential Final Fantasy game. However, it's not as good as almost any of the ones it influences. So, I think you should play it almost last.
Interesting.
My conclusion. I do not think this is one of the first Final Fantasies you should play. I think if you love the series and you want a new perspective, a bit of appreciation to where it all came from, 3 is the first place you should go. But if you're trying to get into the series, there is nothing 3 does that another game doesn't do significantly better.
Yeah, I agree
without
with that.
3, you wouldn't have amazing moments in all of the other Final Fantasies. You wouldn't have arguably the best Final Fantasy story in Shadowbringers. It's like 3 has a lot of value, but none of it's in Final Fantasy 3. It's a really weird one. I guess that's just my take on it.
Yeah, at the time of its release, it kind of knocked everything else out of the water, and it sold, I mean, more than 1 and 2 combined. It's what really gave Squaresoft it really got them off their feet. Everyone talks about how Final Fantasy 1 did that, and yes, it dragged them out of the mud, but Final Fantasy 3 is the thing that kept them trucking through it and onto bigger and better things, you know? Like you said, does it do anything better than any of the other Final Fantasies? No, I don't think so. But if you want to start somewhere in the Final Fantasy series and you wanted to go with a classic game first, and I mean like out of 1, 2, and 3, I would recommend 3. I would 100%. Recommend 3. Yeah. For someone
go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, for someone who likes to see how a series evolves over time, then I think every single one is worth playing.
Yeah. They've all got their kind of merits, I guess.
Yeah.
I think 3 of the original 3, though, feels the most like Final Fantasy. Recognizably like what the later Final Fantasies... Like, if they have a feel to them, a soul... Then you can envisage that. You can envisage... Oh, come on, how do I say
Envision.
Envisage? There we go, we got it. Took a while, I was clumsy over my own words. You can... I'm not even going to use that word anymore. You can visualize it more in 3. It's more evident in 3 than it is in 1 or 2. But yeah, strange.
Totally. And if you were going to play a version of it, I do recommend the Pixel Remaster over the NES original or the DS remake. I think the DS remake does add some stuff to the narrative that could be interesting if we've talked about the narrative enough to the point where we can talk about that. But if you're going to make characters out of the characters, you should make characters out of the characters, is kind of how I see that. And I think it kind of takes a little bit of away from the themes that they were going for. But then also add some in some other areas. But from a gameplay perspective, unless you want like the toughest challenge that you can get, and you're trying to like play each of the games, just play the Pixel Remaster. Not only does it have, auto battle and these quality of life things that put it on par or like on the same pace as modern games, but if you wanted to, now with the Pixel Remasters, if you wanted to just see the story that's there, you can turn off random encounters, you can change your EXP growth, you can do all sorts of stuff that I should have been there in the start, honestly, with the Pixel Remasters, because for example, I think not having that and then having someone play Final Fantasy II is a huge problem. Imagine going through like all that door system, but you can turn off random encounters for that moment. You know what I mean? Yeah. And now you can. It just wasn't there at first. Yeah. But I think it takes the best of the NES and the DS remake for the most part, and puts it into one product and gives you something that's a little bit closer to the original vision, which is the entire goal of the Pixel Remasters. And then as far as how it carries the spirit of Final Fantasy, I think every game does in one way or another. I think at the end of the day, the spirit of Final Fantasy is a lot of things to a lot of people, but when you break it down at its core, it has to do with like these 4 random people, right? And they're on a quest to save the world, right? I mean,
pretty much.
And, and Final Fantasy III does that, and whatever themes go along with that are in that game itself. I'm kind of fumbling over my words with this one, but other than that, you just have some things like the chocobos and the summons that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? It's kind of a weird subject to talk about, but I like to bring it up anyway. And the reason why I do is because like so many people have a different idea of what Final Fantasy is to them, that they're like, oh, 16 doesn't look like a Final Fantasy, it's an action game. You know?
I remember seeing recently about that Sakaguchi always used to say, or something, maybe it wasn't Sakaguchi, but someone used to say, that Final Fantasy, to the developers, to the people who made it, was whatever they wanted to do at the time.
Yeah.
Like, Final Fantasy doesn't have to be a specific thing. If anything, it's a series about evolution, about trying new things. I mean, I've only played 2 Dragon Quest games, so I might not be the best qualified person to say this, but when I look at Dragon Quest 1 and I look at Dragon Quest 11,
they're consistent.
They're the same.
Yeah.
They're not the same, obviously, but
right.
Like, the consistent is a way better word to use than the same. It's like the you can tell that they found something that worked, and they've refined it over game after game after game. Like there's a formula that is present from early Dragon Quest to late Dragon Quest. Final Fantasy has always been like, right, we're going to spend a game perfecting this formula, and then we're going to burn it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find a new formula that's fun. And we're going to burn that one after. And then a few games later, they might be like, let's repurpose that old formula we burned. It's constantly reinvention. It's constant fun. And I think that is the spirit of Final Fantasy. Everything is trying something new. It's pushing the boat out. It's seeing how far you can go. Sometimes it doesn't really work, but that's the point. It's not always going to work, but the most important thing is, as cheesy and cliche as it is that you really tried to do something interesting and fun and new. And Final Fantasy always does that, and 3 is no exception.
Yeah, so I think that's the perfect way to put it. And that's why I brought up the whole Final Fantasy 16 thing, because Final Fantasy means a certain thing to certain people based off of how they got into the series and how they played it. But at the end of the day, every single game in it contributes to the larger picture of what the series is. And the developers want nothing. They don't want to be put into a box. Like from 1, 2, and 3's turn-based to ATB and future titles to action to a fusion of the two to whatever the hell they want. But there's always going to be some consistency in the elements that are in the games themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think you put it beautifully with what you said.
Thanks. How kind. It's lovely. Yeah, I'm kind of glad because I kind of made it up as I was going along, to be honest. But
and that's what this podcast is all about.
But yeah, it's fun. There's a kind of intangible element to it where something feels like Final Fantasy. And as you say, it's subjective. It goes person to person.
Mm-hmm.
Does this game feel like Final Fantasy? Yeah, it does to me. So I think it carries on the legacy pretty well, and it started it all off. But likewise, if someone else played this and they're like, doesn't feel very Final Fantasy to me, valid, because the whole point is that it's about what feels like Final Fantasy to you.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the series.
Totally. And what are your final thoughts on Final Fantasy III?
Don't like it. No. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a tricky one because, like, it's what I said before. If you ask any specific question, I'm probably going to be harsh.
Yeah.
And then if you ask an overall question, I'll probably be a bit more positive.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one of the worst Final Fantasy games. Don't get me wrong. I think the only 2 that are worse are 1 and 2. Of like main series entries, I think they consistently get better. But is it still good? Yeah, it's got a lot of charm. I'd say that like 80% of the game is fun to play. There are some moments that are less fun, but what game doesn't have some moments where you're like, even your favorite game probably has that one bit where you're like, oh. And Final Fantasy III has a few of those, but it's really fulfilling to be able to play something that was the building blocks for the whole series. Get to play with those building blocks. Because that's the foundation for everything else. And getting to personally experience that is it's kind of exciting. Even if it doesn't play as smoothly as everything it inspired, there's you appreciate it more for what it did down the line rather than in the game itself. But overall, worth a go.
I agree. I enjoyed the experience quite a bit with a few sour moments, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed the game quite a bit, especially when compared to the previous game that I had played in the series. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes me more excited to get into 4, 5, 6.
Oh yeah.
Than I was ever before.
I can't wait to see what you think of 6.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it.
Game.
Yeah. But let me know what you guys think about Final Fantasy III. What are your final thoughts on it? If you enjoyed the podcast, and it means a lot if you support it by subscribing to the channel and giving it a like. Definitely check out Ludiscere's content. It'll be linked in the description below. And feel free to check out any of the other podcasts on Final Fantasies or other game series that you're interested in. And that's going to do it. So thank you guys so much for watching.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on, Ludiscere.
Oh, no, it was a pleasure. I had a great time. Thanks for inviting me. It's good fun.
Of course. And I'll catch you guys later.